Hey everybody, can you hear me okay? I've got a little air unit running in the background, so I just want to make sure that that's not, you need to remember that's what the camera is. Um, Interfering with the audio quality. Make sure you can hear me okay. So I've got the question and answer window up. So hopefully I'll see some comments in there that you can actually see me, and this is working. Hi, side effects. Awesome, so you can, yes, perfect. Okay, good. This is cool. I like this website that they gave me that gives me access to everyone's questions. So I'll do my best to kind of glance over there. So here we are, round two, carrying on with COVID-DEMONI 19. And on your screen right now, I've got this banner with a caricature that my friend Lola Hale made of me. Oh, thanks, Jennifer. So she's an amazing artist. Lola Hale Art, you should check her out. I work with her, and she's fantastic. So she made that thing for me with the little Pixologic logo on my leather jacket, my little pins and everything, and my ring. So it's pretty cool. Iced coffee. So we're at 2:58. We'll make small talk for a couple minutes so people that show up at the posted time don't miss out on anything. So I'm really excited to be back. I got a bit of time today so we can dive in and do some more process on COVID-DEMONI. I am kind of uh, ideating it and developing it in real time with you, so you'll see quite a lot of my thought process. Your stream lag is quite long. I don't know how to fix that because that's just running off my internet. Um, Maybe I got someone from Pixologic that is on my phone chat, so if they have any suggestions. But as long as you can still see everything and hear me, that's the important part. There'll probably be a bit of a lag to me answering questions then, but cool, thanks. Okay, awesome. So COVID-DEMONI. A lot of my work, like I mentioned last time, if you saw the last stream, very influenced by sort of like Byzantine, Orthodox, Christian Orthodox, and Roman Catholic art. Um, quarantine sucks. Not enjoying it at all. I like the alone time. I like the time to do work, but it's getting old. Um, but I saw some shops were open yesterday, so I think things are starting to come back to normal. But my parents are in the United States, and they've told me that things are opening back, or were opening back up, but then cases have spiked. So goodness gracious knows where this is all going to end. So a little tour of what we have here. Organized it into folders. Folders are wonderful. A couple versions old in ZBrush, but they're fantastic, and we'll make a lot of use of them today. So I've got a body folder where I've got the body, and I've got a little Roman numeral. I was laying in bed last night doing some sketches, and I thought, oh my God, Roman numerals, I should put a 19 on it. And, the Roman numerals for 19 just look badass. It's XIX. So we're going to try and do a Google, or excuse me, a Boolean, or perhaps just carve it in as if it's scarification. So that's the meaning behind the XIX there. Then I've got the lungs, which we made in the last session with our little lung sockets, and our mesh that we created from an Illustrator file. And then the lungs themselves, which we need to shift around, so we're going to make use of the rib cage I sculpted from. I made a very simple box model of that some time back when I sculpted this. It's a medical skeleton that I made, very highly accurate, detailed. So while I was doing Cadaver Lab and sculpting anatomy figures, or working on an anatomy DVD that didn't end up actually getting produced, but I did a lot of work on that and was in Cadaver Lab, and so I just sculpted it from scratch. I split it by polygrouping it and then splitting it, and we'll look at that as well because we're going to actually be manipulating that. Someone was asking how I made the rib cage. So we're going to make use of folders and transpose groups so we can move the lungs, because the lungs are actually too far back right now. And further down, I've got a skeleton folder where I've got a skull sitting inside of where I had the original skull, where I did the project primitive to create that bulbous head. I have that split rib cage, which I shifted the shapes. I like to make the shapes. I'm very big on shape language and feelings in shapes, like how do shapes make you feel. And you know, I went to design school, but the first person that ever drew the line between my graphic design, or my industrial design and graphic design classes that I took, and creature design was Jim McPherson, who's a sculptor who worked for Rick Baker for years and years. He's an amazing sculptor, amazing artist, and I worked with him at Gentle Giant Studios, and Jim said, he was giving me some feedback on something, and he's just like, in his real gentle manner, he's like, well, that's not a scary shape. And I was like, what? And he's like, well, those aren't scary shapes. They're scary shapes and friendly shapes. And it's one of those things. It should have occurred to me, but it never occurred to me on that base level. Yes, there are scary shapes, and there are friendly shapes, and there are inviting shapes, and there are prickly shapes. And so in this, I'm just trying to create a lot of aggressive, thrusting kind of jagged, weaponized forms, so weaponizing the anatomy. Then going down to the pelvis, we're only really going to crop it to about there. If we have time to go to keyshot, we will, but it depends if we have the time. If we don't, then I'll do a third one, because I really enjoy these a lot. I enjoy seeing everybody. So thanks again for coming. Next, I've got alt heads. These are just alternative heads that I've cut off of other versions and stacked them in here in case I need them, because I am planning for potentially having issues with the little stalks. So if that is the case, I have spare heads where I've got backup plans where I can work around that. Excuse me. So that's why I have an alt head folder. And then spare parts, because you always got to have spare parts. And these are the halved rib cages and another skull, which I probably don't need to carry around, but I've got it in there anyway. I'm using the 9 hotkey to quick save, and I also manually go and save iteratively in my save folder, because I am extremely paranoid about data loss. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is I want to shift these lungs, because the lungs are too far back and I want them to be a bit forward, since I want the light to fall on them, and there's a lot of things that I want to do with these lungs. So I'm going to go to my lungs folder. Inside the lungs folder, I actually have some of these shapes here, which I am going to pull these out and put them into spare parts. So I'm going to collapse skeleton, and I'm just going to drag these down into spare parts, because I don't want to transpose these, because I have those where they are for a specific reason. There we go. So now it's just the lungs. Oh, sketchbooks. Another thing. So I was going to mention. So I teach ZBrush, Intro to ZBrush and ZBrush Creature Design at Gnomon School of Visual Effects, and I started talking to my students a lot about how old am I? How old do I look? Talking to my students a lot about their sketchbooks. When I was in school, we had to keep a sketchbook. It was we were graded on it. Just about every class, you turned in your sketchbook, midterm and final, and they would look at it. So the culture at my school was your sketchbook was with you all the time, and you would never open someone else's sketchbook. You would never look at somebody else's sketchbook. It was super private. It was yours. And that created the situation where it could be quite intimate, be like sharing your sketchbook with somebody. And we would always joke that you have the I can draw drawing in your sketchbook that you would show people, because having to live in your sketchbook like that became your diary, for one thing, which made it a bit strange turning it in for credit. But also, you became accustomed to doing bad drawings. And it occurred to me that no one told me that it was something that I got to by necessity. And something about the sketchbook that I think is really important is don't be afraid to make marks, and don't make marks with the expectation of showing them to anyone. Give yourself some space where you're doing something where you're not thinking about putting it on ArtStation or putting it in front of somebody or impressing somebody. Just make a bunch of scribbles, literally scribbles, because making marks on paper helps your thought process and will help you. Bonjour, ça va? I can't see your name, but someone's writing to me in French. Bonjour. Um, Making marks will help you in ZBrush as well. Making marks on paper, it'll help any medium that you're on. So, like, I'm just was laying in bed last night and just like and just sort of like getting thoughts down. I can't see my own camera right now, so let me alt tab over to OBS so I can see it. Yeah. So I mean, these I wouldn't be showing these under normal circumstances. If I was doing something like I was thinking through something for Kitty Would Be King or Pacific Rim 2, this is a stage that I wouldn't be showing, but it's just me thinking on paper, um, and just thinking about what the pose could be, thinking about what the composition could be, thinking about, last night, I mean, I really love halos, so I was thinking, oh, the halo could be made out of rib bones, so it doesn't have to be anything really showy, it's just for me. And this book is just for me. Nobody ever needs to see it or anything in it. And if I do something in it I like, then I might put it up somewhere, or I might carry on and make it something more refined. But the point of it is, I've just in the past few terms really been impressing that point upon the people in my class to make sure that you have some artistic space that isn't weighted by the need to show off. Like, give yourself a space to do bad work, because everyone does exploratory, quick, dirty, just ideas that are scribbles for themselves. The problem is you don't see them. And so everyone assumes that everything that everybody does that they see out in the industry is always perfect, and it's really not. Give yourself that space to do that thought process. So enough of the rambling there. I don't want to get too far off track. Is it safe to download ZBrush Core Mini? I found it difficult not to feel like every piece of work I do has to be good enough to be shown. Yes, let that go, Carrie, let it go. Let it go. And also, let go of the fact that if you don't like your work, because another thing I've been telling my students the past couple terms, and because I realize no one really said it to me, but I know it's true amongst a lot of my fellow artists, is I've never liked anything I've done for more than a day or two, ever. Like, the next day, all I see is what I want to change. And that's the process and the journey is the reward. So don't also feel like, you're going to get to this magical point where everything's perfect, because that would actually be quite boring. Just be happy with the fact that if you see what you need to fix, that's awesome, because it's much, much better than not seeing what you need to fix. Want to become famous by followers, primes, and viewers on ad viewers. Oh, that's great to know. Thank you. Doing all my sketch work during bedtime. I am, because that's when I can just lay down with some tea and just let my mind wander. So the lung folder here, this is a nice thing about the folders. We can just click transpose set, and it automatically creates a transpose set for us here. If I go to the transpose tool, where is it? Oh, it's because I've got the transpose line turned on. Turn the gizmo on. So now you can see it's sort of shaded out everything else. Am I married? No, but if you've got a British passport, no. So I'm going to unlock the gizmo, and I'm going to center it to the unmasked mesh center with that button there. You actually don't have to unlock it to do that, but I just want to kind of scooch it up a little bit, which you do have to unlock it. That just unlocks it so it's not actually moving anything. Lock it, and now it's actually moving things. So what I want to do is I want to shift those lungs forward a bit. Yeah, the folders are so useful for keeping yourself organized, because I really like being organized as much as possible. So I just want to make sure that I get these pulled forward. And I'm going to kind of cheat the reality of it. I want these sockets to be sitting proud out from the chest, so we're going to pull that out. And I believe we're actually going to shift these ribs out a little bit more too. I like the idea of kind of weaponizing those shapes. So we've got the lungs moved forward now. And I'm going to just alt-click on our split ribs here. So a couple things here. I was looking at this, and when I was doing my little doodles that I showed you, I was thinking, oh, it'd be really cool to get that, like, Edwardian high collar, my little scribbles, but like if I was doing this to show you, I would render it really nicely, but just like this Edwardian kind of high collar, this very regal collar, because I want this thing to feel imperious. So grab these ribs here, and I'm actually just going to pull these up a little bit and pull out my thumbnail, and this gives me a nice look at what we're going to get here. So let's just pull that out, maybe pull this down. I want to kind of also think about my not implied line, oh, the word's just fallen out of my head, but the curve that's being implied from here down into here. So I'm just thinking about the flow of curves through the design. Always thinking about basic abstract shapes, always, because everything is coming from those abstract shapes. And the things that you like because you like the combination of abstract shapes. For the most part, I mean, that's like the most basic way of looking at all of it. So it's really good not to lose sight of that. So it's interesting, starting to look a little bit like a Spider-Man logo. So I'm going to pull back from that a little bit, come back here, and maybe pull this back and up and see what we get there. Well, that's kind of nice. And then I want to think about the ribs here. So I'm going to turn down my draw size. I'm not ignoring anybody. I'm working here, so I can't always see the questions at the same time. Why did you pass my question? Is it safe to download ZBrush Core Mini? Because on the site it says if you have a problem, close your antivirus. Yeah, I would imagine it's safe. I don't think it's going to be a problem. Was that the question? Yeah, I'm not going to be looking at the Twitch chat because then it'll just be me talking to everybody rather than doing anything. So cool. Is the COVID virus artificially? Somebody asked if I was a doctor. No, I'm not a doctor, but sometimes I wish I had become a doctor. I think that would be pretty neat, but I like being an artist. Maybe I'll go back to school and become a doctor in my retirement, like that Robin Williams movie. I'm going to go to my masking controls and use the mask lasso so I can just lasso this. And this is exploratory. I don't know if what I've got in mind is going to actually work, but I'm not afraid to try it. So I think what I want to do is just play around with the move brush, and I'm going to perhaps flare these shapes out. So I'm going to go back to transpose, but I'm going to switch to my transpose line. Now for those of you that have never used the transpose line because you started using ZBrush with the transpose gizmo, it can be a bit confusing, but it's much easier than it looks. You just draw a line, and then if you're on rotate, you click around the outer circle, and it rotates around the opposite circle. So I'm going to draw my line here, and I'm going to rotate these back. Again, this is kind of just me exploring something that I was thinking about. Sorry for the sirens going by, if you can hear those. So I just want to kind of open this up a little bit, but I'm not sure that that's actually going to work the way I want it to. So I think I'm going to narrow my mask. I'm not going to be looking at the questions for a bit because I want to get going on this. So my apologies if I miss anything, but I'll do my best to scroll back and get it. And if you have questions and you want to contact me, you can always contact me at Maddie@maddiemonster.com. You can find all of my social media at maddiemonster.com. It's my portfolio and my demo reel. So I just want to sort of pull this out and back and pull these ribs forward a little bit. No, I'm not liking that, so let's just go ahead and put that back where it was, and I'm just going to widen the shape and then pull down the two halves of the sternum, which create these sort of prongs here. And I like this little angle there that we're getting. I'm going to go to my brush controls for the move brush, and I'm going to go to curve, and I'm going to turn on accurate curve mode. And let's just make a little kick right there. The accurate curve mode makes the brush adhere to the curve that defines the brush shape here. So it basically makes the move brush make nice little pointy protrusions and stuff. So let's just pull a couple little kicks right there, a little kick back here, again just thinking about the graphic shapes and the feelings that those shapes inspire. So I want jagged and aggressive and infectious. There we go. So we'll clear our mask. Alright. Speaking of my sketchbook, I've got a notes page in here that talks about the stuff that I want to talk, that mentions the stuff I want to talk about. Flare the ribs, the rib mantle, rib halo. Sorry, just one moment. I have to let a delivery man in. Okay, back. Sorry about that. Constant buzzer at the front door with Amazon deliveries and whatnot. Let me look at the chat since we're here. She's very busy, like crawling in the kitchen floor. Did you go to medical school, Jennifer? Hi, miss. You look like old creepy lady. I am an old creepy lady. Unless you mean her. Okay. I don't even live in America. Why? I don't have an opinion on that. Oh, multiplying 0. Here we are. So let's take a look at the little shapes that I put down here in spare parts. I had a couple in here that I found interesting that were a happy accident. There we go. This was my, oops, where did I drag it to? Where did it go? I think I just accidentally put it in skeleton. I did. And I want to drag it up out of lungs so it's in between those two folders. There we go. So this shape here I used to create the little prongs and legs on the lung sockets. Retopo it just using ZBrush or Aero. So what I'll do is I will alt-click on this, and I found it really interesting just in its default position. I scaled it up, and I was like, oh, that's actually quite interesting. I love happy accidents, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, oops, I still have my transpose group set up, so I'm going to click the pizza boxes here. Joseph just calls those the pizza boxes, and I think that's fantastic. And I'm just going to scale this up, and I quite like the angle that's falling on there. And again, it's got that nice kind of pronged sort of look, so maybe we'll try it with a little rotate back like so. And it's got another little kick there that I like. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the geometry menu, make sure I don't have subdivision levels on it, and I will duplicate it. I could use Subtool Master for this, but I'm just going to do it manually. And I'm going to go to the deformation menu, and I'm going to mirror it across the x-axis. And did that work? Ah, there we go. Mirrored across the x-axis. So now I've got 2 of those. And it's just kind of an interesting effect here. I don't particularly care for what's down here, so I'll just delete it. I'll get rid of it. Let's merge them together first. So I'm going to clear my mask. Looks like there's a bit of a mask on there. I'm going to go to the one above it, and I'm going to go to Merge. And I'm going to save my work before I do this. Just hitting the 9 key, I'm going to go to Merge, Merge Down, click OK. And that merges those 2 together into a single subtool. And then I will isolate that area, go to Geometry, Modify Topology, delete Hidden. And then I'm going to close holes, just to keep things clean. So I'll just click Close Holes, and that'll close those holes off. And then I'll just turn on my X symmetry and just smooth that back a little bit. And those 2 little like mandibles down there at the pubic bone are actually kind of cool. So we'll keep that. And taking the move brush, And I'm looking at my silhouette. See, any drawing, Andrew, would definitely help with your ZBrush. Just draw. Just draw for the joy of it and to make shapes and explore shapes. Like I was saying earlier, don't necessarily do it because you are worried about showing it. Like give yourself you do some stuff because you want to make it really good and show it off and everything, of course. But like it's important to give yourself a space to explore, no matter what level you're at. Do I sculpt anything other than monsters? Yeah, but usually for my own pleasure, I do monsters. Like I've done. I did a bunch of Hobbit collectibles, did dwarves, done anatomy sculpture. Um, what else? I've sculpted digi-doubles, where you get um, controversial title, where you get an actor and you resculpt their scan data to clean it up and then sculpt their facial expressions. So I've done a lot other than monsters, but I try not to. Cool. Trying to get all the questions, but there's lots of them, so I'm going to go back to this. Let's save our work. I've always sculpted monsters. I started doing monsters when I was little. I set up with clay in my parents' basement and used to sculpt Halloween masks and make Halloween masks for fun. ZBrush on the iPad would be amazing. So, there we go. Where were we? Red mantle, bone alphas, BDM. Let's go back to the body. So I remeshed the body and ended up, of course, got rid of detail doing that because I was actually having a bit of trouble with Dynamesh. So I just said, well, I want to revisit the body anyway. So when I remeshed it, I used the polypaint option to cluster a lot of density in the head, and that's found under Geometry, ZRemesher. Use polypaint. So if you turn that on and then turn the slider up, you will be painting red onto your object, and anywhere that's red is going to get more geometry than anywhere that is not red or blue. So it allowed me to sort of cluster geometry there. Since I'm not expecting this to be an animation topology, it's just a working topology, I wasn't terribly concerned with it. So I'm just going to add a subdivision level now, and go in with my damn standard brush, and I just want to do what I call sort of catching shadow and highlight. So I just want to come through here. Oh, got a bit of a lag on this. Hopefully that resolves itself. There's quite a lag there, so I'm carrying around, it's not even a million polygons, so just want to check my activity monitor really quickly. Bum, 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 bum. This over here, and make sure nothing crazy is running. Yep, that Scene Kit QL thumbnail extension keeps running, and I keep having to quit it. Force quit, yes. It eats up like gigabytes of RAM. Now that should fix things. Let's try it now. Tried Googling it to see what it was, and all I found were people asking how to get rid of it. And nobody could really give a non-developer's answer as to what it actually does. So it doesn't seem to ruin anything if I end task on it. So I'm using the standard brush, and just need to turn up my Z intensity a little bit. Not really getting what I'm expecting to get here. I'm going to solo my object. Zoom in here. Go to frame mode. That's why, because it's the RGB. I was like, something strange. There we go. I'll turn down my intensity, and then I just want to catch highlight along here. And catch highlight along here. Go to my clay tubes brush, and I like turning off the alpha on the clay tubes brush and turning the focal shift down. I just want to build out that deltoid a little bit. And that's again set to RGB because I was using that to paint earlier before our session. So just building up that deltoid, building up this, which is the clavicular head of the pectoralis muscle. I really like the shape that that makes. The way it sort of comes down from the first third of the clavicle and tucks under the deltoid. Go to the dance standard brush again, just sort of stroke along the flow of the muscles. Something I talk about in my classes too is like, it's great to study anatomy. It's really great to study anatomy, just for the joy of it even, but also to help you in your work. But when it comes to like using it, I think George Bridgman has a really good point, as well as many, many other instructors and authors who'd say that knowing every individual muscle is not as important as knowing the large shapes. And I tell people in my class that like, if you retain anything, learn the origin and insertion of large groups. Because if you go in with your damn standard brush and then you're stroking from the origin towards the insertion of a muscle, you've got it in the right direction, it's going to get you a lot further than going in there and obsessively sculpting. Oh, my tablet's acting up. Obsessively sculpting every little nook and cranny. And it takes away the paralysis that you might experience from being overwhelmed with information if you can break it down into the very, very simple thing that you need to learn. It's like, oh, I need to learn the large forms, I need to learn the origins and insertions. And you want a great place to learn that? George Bridgman. George Bridgman's books are amazing, and they're very inexpensive. You get them on Amazon. They're Dover publications. And he just is a treasure. I have a blog feature at maddiemonster.com. It's Maddie Monster's Library, where I will review some of my favorite books and talk about why I think they're particularly valuable. I do it once a month. The last one I did was Elliot Goldfinger's Atlas of Anatomy for the Artist, which was my go-to anatomy book all through college. Before that, I did Peck's Anatomy. So if you go check that out, you can see I talk about what I think is valuable in those particular books and why they've been so important for me. Oh, terrible lag on my brush right now. There's something running in that system memory. I'm not too worried about the back. That's one thing that I end up doing a lot if I'm working something up for a concept, is I will sometimes just not work on the back because I don't have the time and I want to focus in on what will get it approved to go to the next stage, and then I will revisit the back and revisit other parts. You could back yourself into a corner like that where you've got to very quickly resolve stuff that people might assume is finished, but that's sort of the thrill of all of it. There we go. I just wanted to sort of bring a bit more form in here. I'm going to come back up to the head. Oh my goodness, there's definitely something funky going on here. Let me just check my system monitor again, make sure nothing's popped up to eat memory. Nope. While I'm over here, we'll look at the chat. Thanks, Andrew. Sound settings are the laptop mic. Sounds like you're moving your hand across the keys and it's picking it up. Is it not picking up my... It should be coming through here. Let me check that. Yeah, it's set to Corsair. Not sure. I don't know. I'm a little worried about going in and tweaking settings and then messing something up. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Please fix the voice mic. Okay, so something's going on with the voice mic. Triangles. The mic is a little wild. Yeah, the orc bust. Alright, exposure. Sorry, I'm just scrolling up. Drawing exercises. Looks like I got everything for the most part. Mostly I write. Sometimes there's a lot of muffling noises. All right, I'll just go look at OBS and see. So that's mic auxiliary 1. Testing, 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 testing. So that's working. I'm going to turn this one off. Can you still hear me? Is this better? I just turned off the other mic, but this one's still working. So let me go look at the chat. Is that better? Oh, good. Okay, cool. Crackling noise from time to time, like loud static. But is that an improvement on the audio? Hopefully. Okay, awesome. Cool. Sounds the same. See, I'm not a pro streamer, so there's audio input capture. I don't know, maybe if I turn this off, then I've got one audio stream going. So I've just turned off one of the other microphones, so tell me if that is okay. Let me go back to the chat. Okay. So I'm like moving around. Okay, cool. Hopefully that fixes it. All right, where was I? I was doing the head. So I'm revisiting the head here, and I'm going to save my work because I haven't saved in a while. So fundamental sculpture drawing anatomy. Well, I mean, I know really good sculptors, ZBrush sculptors who've never sculpted in clay. I don't think it's a prerequisite, but it isn't going to hurt you by any stretch. I think it's really nice to put your hands on form and make shapes by hand. And now I've got a terrible lag on my Wacom. Like, unworkable lag. There's still noise sometimes. I'm sorry, I don't know how to... Let me sort this out, and then I'll take a look at the microphones again. Maybe a loose wire. I mean, it's let me. So go check the system activity monitor, and that thumbnail extension is back. Go away. See, it's eating up 191 CPU and 5 gigabytes. Scene kit QL thumbnail extension. Force quit. Every time that comes up, it just throttles my Wacom and my ZBrush. So come through here, turn off my X symmetry because I want this facial cavity kind of thing to be asymmetrical. Oh good, it's only 3:35. Felt like I've been going much longer than that. I was worried. I didn't want to run out of time. But as I said, we'll take it as far as we can take it, and then we'll get together again. Because there's no reason why we can't. So I'm just going to create this sort of weird, fractured kind of texture in the head here. And I'm going to take the move brush and just hold down the Alt key so I can just pull that nasal bone up over the nasal bone that I've got sitting there underneath the model. And I'm just going to tweak this around a little bit. Make it kind of weird. Make it weird. I'll turn my X symmetry back on. I'm going to my Dan Standard brush, and I'm just going to accentuate the temporal ridge that would be right here. But the character of it's going to change because the head is so spherical. But I want to get that negative space back, that draft back behind the zygomatic bone and the zygomatic arch. So let's bring this out. I'm going to step down a subdivision level. Once again, I'm just experiencing quite a lag on my blackened tablet. And let's push this in. I'm going to take my move brush, and I'm just going to pull these shapes out just by holding down the Alt key. And there's sort of like a bump at the front of the skull called the frontal eminence. And I don't want it to be pointy, so I'm going to go to my brush controls and turn off accurate curve mode, and that gives me a softer fall off on the brush. And then we'll just adjust that. Is the mic close to my head? No. Just checking the chat. I'm going to pull that out. I'm just looking at it in silhouette. And I want to bring that forward. Bring that forward. And I want to shift my cheekbones again. Bring these forward. Bring that back a little bit. And let's zoom in here. I'll use some masking here. And I need to reset it back to pen, so I'm going to go to mask pen. Oh, I'm going to go back to a stroke rather than the lasso. There we go. And I just want to mask this area out so I can create some draft. So I'll invert that mask, and I'll take my move brush and rotate off a little bit. Oh, God. That is really annoying. And then pull that back just to give ourselves some depth here. And I'm going to control-click to invert that mask and go to a front view here, and I'm just going to pull that cheekbone out. Like so. If you like me, you can talk about ZBrush while I do ZBrush. I've got Introduction to ZBrush at the Gnomon Workshop. It's a video training series. It's actually over 20 hours long. Because I believe if you're going to do Intro to ZBrush, you should put as much of ZBrush into it as you can, so I put as much into it as I could. And didn't realize it was 20 hours long until I finally delivered it. But I always do that. I did that last time for 2018. It's always quite long. And it's just because, you know, it's like when I wrote my books. One of the first things I told my publisher was, whatever we put on the cover, I want to have the tutorial in the book on how to actually do it. Because when I was a student, I would get really frustrated where I'd go to Barnes & Noble and I'd get this awesome looking book on painting in Photoshop, and it had this cool cover, and then I would like look at it and be like, well, there's nothing in here on how to do that. It's like real basic tutorials. I remember Aaron Sims, who's just you know, another really awesome artist, big influence when I was a kid. He was in makeup effects, which is where I started, is makeup effects. I remember Aaron did a soft image book, and it was like, it struck me when I got that book that it actually did talk about what was on the cover. And it was like, so like, now that I create educational content, I always try and make sure that it's not one of the situations where it doesn't really take you through like what you want to learn in depth. You know? So I always try and make sure that it's you get a lot for your time. And that said, the cover image that I use for the intro, we don't actually make that in the intro DVD or the intro videos, but the techniques I use to make it are all in there. Because then it would be 40 hours long. So I'm going to hit the 9 key and save. You buy it standalone, you need a subscription. Yeah, you have to buy it. Buy a subscription from Gnomon, but it's not very expensive, and you get everything. It's really, really worth it. There's something by your right hand that picks up keyboard dragging or something. It might be this. That's my hand moving along the keyboard. I think talk to my Pixologic contact. Alright, so we'll clear that mask, and I believe I just saved, but I'm going to do it again. Very, very paranoid about losing data. I once was working on the Thorin statue for Weta Collectibles, and I got a memory error at the beginning of my day, and it was like, ZBrush didn't crash. So I was like, oh, great, there's no crash, that's awesome, because I thought I was going to crash. And so, naive me, I just kept working for the rest of the day and saving iteratively, like saving 001, 002, 003. But the file itself had corrupted. So when I got back the next day to work, everything I had done the day before was corrupted. And so I'm super paranoid now. I mean, it wasn't that big a deal, it was just one day. Could be worse. I knew somebody once who was sculpting a wax head of a Johnny Depp character, and he just squeezed it too hard. He was holding it the wrong way, and it just shattered in his hand. So like all that work just gone. So again, I'm just sort of modulating the surface, putting in some kind of a variation here based on what the skeletal anatomy would be, a potential like sort of atrophied temporalis muscle in there. I just want there to be some cool shapes here. I'm pushing in this little scallop. If you ever hold an actual human skull, it's really quite neat because you realize just how unified the proportions of the body are, because the front of the zygomatic bone, your thumbs fit perfectly into it, right there, right above the sinuses. It's just interesting that how everything is so proportionally developed. So let's get away from the head. We've been on the head a bit too long. I think I am going to tweak the mouth though. So I want him to be like, I just want to play around with that just a little bit. And I want to put some gravity in these lips. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask the lower lip here. And I want there to be some compression and some gravity here. So I'm going to mask all this out. Invert that mask by control clicking on the background. You can take the standard brush. I'm just going to build this up a little bit. Step up the subdivision level. There we go. By the way, I don't work at high subdivision levels very much. I'm a very, very firm believer that you should make every shape at the lowest subdivision level that can support the shape you're trying to make. Reason being, because the more geometry you're moving around, the harder it is to create graceful transitions between shapes. Because you've got to worry about moving more stuff than is really necessary. And everybody always, like 14 years now teaching ZBrush, the number one thing that new ZBrush users do is they divide up their model immediately. And you don't need to do that. It's the power of ZBrush is not how dense you can divide the model. It's the brush-based sculpting, and it's the interactivity. That's what's amazing about it. Like when it first came out, people were just like, you could go up to 1 million polygons. It's like, you don't really need that to make most things. And, you know, when you're going in and doing detail, of course, yeah, you need that. But the vast majority of what you're doing, you don't need to be up at 1 million polygons, 2 million polygons. I'm at pretty low subdivision level. I'm at subdivision level 2 though. Look up at my active polygons. I don't have a lot of polygons, but I have enough to make the shapes that I'm trying to make. So I just want to create a little crease here. I'm getting that delay on my brush again. I'm going to have to go check my memory. Memory. How are we doing over there? Should be fine. Okay. While I'm over here, I look at the chat. I'm using all my work from last semester, but the fear. Oh yeah. When I was in school, I was working with somebody who plugged their hard drive into a PC. They were a Mac student. They were in the graphic design programs. They were predominantly Mac, and they it asked to initialize the drive to use it, and they didn't understand that that would erase the drive, so it erased all their work for the term, finals and everything. It was awful. It was terrible. Is the audio any better, or is it still making weird noises? Now, as we get down towards the neck, there's a big drop in, there's no static, but it's not unbearable. Right. If you go, just double check the connection there. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. As we get down to the neck, you see it becomes faceted because I clustered a lot of the detail up there in the head. Let's look at my notes here. We flared the ribs to the rib mantle, rib halo, rib blades. Oh, rib blades. Yeah. Let's come down here and let's play around with the serratus and lateral obliques. So let's do some more work on this. So I knocked out some negative spaces in here, because negative spaces are great. They're just as important as positive spaces. Negative spaces are the areas in between your shapes. Everything white here is a negative space, and everything black is a positive space. Voice volume is quite low. I've got really high. When I turned off those other microphones, did that make any real difference? Like, testing. Testing. So I've turned on that other microphone now. Let's see which one that actually is. Like, I don't typically do streaming, so this all makes me feel like an old lady, like a creepy old lady. Input capture 2. I don't know what that is. Let's go to our settings. Go to properties on that. Yeah, that's my gaming headset. Okay. And this one here, properties on that. That's the I show you audio capture. So I'll unmute that. And then this one here is properties. That just says default. So that's probably what I just muted is probably the desktop microphone. So now I should only be on the Corsair microphone. So if you suddenly no longer can hear me, much better. Fantastic. Okay, good. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, cool. All right, so I just want to. Negative spaces are the spaces where you do not have shape, and they are just as much as the shape as the areas where you do have shape. So I just want to kind of play around with where I knocked out these negative spaces, and I want to think about the curves here. I just want to make sure that things have a nice flow to them. I don't want them to be indecisive or ill-defined. I want there to be some design to the shapes that I've made here. I don't want anything to just be, if I can help it, I don't want anything to just be sort of perfunctory. I need to make sure that those ribs are actually outside of the lungs there, although it might be kind of interesting to have the ribs piercing the lungs, but I think it might be driving the metaphor home a bit too hard. So let's go ahead and pull those out a little bit, and then I'll alt-click back on the flesh, and we'll pull that out a little bit as well. Bring this out and back. Bring this down. I like this little tummy pooch here. Pull that down. So there we are. And then from the front, I just want to adjust these shapes here. I just want to always making sure that these things work from multiple views. So like moving around your work as you're working is is really important. And that started to reveal this sort of little accident in the rib cage, which I might go in there and accentuate. I think that could be kind of cool. Go to the clay tubes brush now. Again, I don't have an alpha turned on, and I'm going to isolate my mesh just so I can improve my response time on my brushes. And I'm going to play around with sort of accentuating what would be serratus muscles here, but I'm just giving some form to this area, taking the move brush, and then doesn't the focal point move to the chest rather than the head due to the high frequency detail there? I mean, that's all depending on how we ultimately frame it and finish it. Um, the uh, the idea was for the first read to be the head, and then you get pulled into the chest. But again, I mean, that's all going to be dependent on how it's presented in the final form. And so you definitely want to be aware if you cluster a lot of detail, a lot of shapes in one area, that is going to become a focal point. You also kind of want to be aware of statements, making too many statements. And that was something that I got from John Howe. He was talking about making too many statements in a piece that I think he said you wanted 2 or 3 statements, but sometimes people will try and put, 3 or 4 statements into something, and then it just becomes overwhelmed. And, if John Howe tells you something, you listen. But yeah, that's a very, very good point that where you cluster shapes or cluster details, it's going to call the eye. I'm going to go back to my move brush, and I'm going to go back to the curve controls and turn on accurate curve mode, and I just want to just pull some of this down, make this an irregular kind of shape here, an irregular edge. I'm loath to go back to Dynamesh because I was actually having some troubles with the Dynamesh not registering, so I don't want to eat up time troubleshooting while my Dynamesh wasn't working. So I got everything pretty much Dynamesh to the point that I wanted it, and now I'm going to work with my subdivision levels. And that's another thing too. I only use Dynamesh to develop shapes. Like, I don't like sculpting on a Dynamesh mesh because you can't then move between subdivision levels, and I really do like being able to move between subdivision levels. It's really, really important for my process, and I think for just doing good work, I think it's really hard if you don't have any subdivision levels. Like, Dynamesh is an amazing tool, and I remember having a conversation with somebody from Pixologic that was also an instructor, and we agreed that like Dynamesh is incredible, but it actually made it a little harder for us to teach ZBrush, because before you didn't have to convince people that they needed to use subdivision levels, that there was a benefit to them. But when Dynamesh came out, it's like, if you'd never used subdivision levels before, you might have some trouble understanding, well, why do I want to use subdivision levels if I can just do Dynamesh for everything? It's like, well, because you can't step down, you can't step up and down, you can't get the nuance of form that you can get if you can move down to the lowest subdivision level and then tweak something and then step back up. Brain is a little bit on autopilot here, just sort of playing around with these shapes and this bit of flesh there. Let's take the move brush and push that back in. I'm going to step down my subdivision levels so I'm dealing with less geometry, and I'm going to go back to my brush and turn off accurate curve mode. Something that I do lots of times like that, eventually I'll make a button for it. If you look down here, I've got a bunch of custom buttons. These are things that I do all the time, and the custom brushes I make using macros. If you haven't explored macros, I encourage you to. They're right there, the macro menu, and literally it's just recording a sequence of actions in ZBrush. So there I've got buttons for masking by texture. I've got buttons for switching materials, like repetitive actions that I find myself doing over and over again, especially on one particular project. I'll just create a button for it. And you don't have to ZScript to do it. You can just record it, and save it into the default location where it asks you to save, and it's immediately available. You don't even have to reload ZBrush. So I want to get some sort of sag here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat this like a bit of drapery. I'm just going to go in here and create these little folds. I'm going to step up because I could use an extra subdivision level now. I'm just stepping up. I haven't added another one. I just want to make sure that I can get these sort of creases there. Bring that brush up. Got a terrible lag again. What is that behind you? I don't know. Let me look. Um, that is a wardrobe, and that is a window with plants in it. And then, like, the rest is just a bookshelf. Is that flowers? Yes. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, Sean. Um, yeah, I've got flowers in the window. I don't know if you can see them, but yeah, there are flowers in the window. Definitely this will be posted. Definitely will be posted. All right. So let's get that nice shape there and there. And, oh, I should save. Hitting the number 9. Dividing again. I've now added a subdivision level because I want to be able to get in here and do a little bit more tweaks. Let's solo this. I don't need to see the rest of the model right now to get this, so I'm just picking out shadow. And I'm just thinking about how the flesh here might buckle and hang. And I want to break this big shape up here into a couple smaller forms. So let's zoom into that. And try and get this broken up a little bit. Let's go to frame mode. It's giving me a little bit of a problem. I'm going to smooth that back. And I'm going to turn my draw size down and my Z intensity up. And I just want to break this into 2 forms here. There we go. And we'll let that fork about there maybe. My brush is actually getting a little bit funky going around that edge. Sometimes my Wacom tablet acts up during these streams. I'd like to do more of these, but I find that my little Mac laptop struggles with OBS. And but I still love my Mac. I love it. This PC for years and then got a Mac last year and quite like it. Can't play any video games on it, but I don't have time to play video games anyway. I love the art in games, but I have one experience with video games, like playing, that taught me a lesson. I went to Comic-Con. This was back in 2007, 2006. And they gave me a gift bag with my ticket. And I spent the day on the floor. It was my first time at Comic-Con. I was like, this is really cool. Wow, awesome. And don't get me wrong, I love games. I love game art. I love the art of games. I love what goes into making them. I've enjoyed every game I've worked on. But this is, you'll get what I mean here in a moment. So I come home to Los Angeles from San Diego. My partner at the time stayed in San Diego with parents. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go back to LA. And so I'm spending the night on my own. And I'm like, oh, let's see what's in this gift bag. And there's a CD in there for World of Warcraft. And I'm like, oh, I've heard about this. This is like EverQuest. I've heard of this. I'll give this a try. So I installed World of Warcraft. And then 24 hours later, I ejected the disc, broke it in half, and uninstalled it. I played the game for 24 hours straight. It was so addictive. And I loved it. I loved it. When I realized what I had done, I was like, no, I can't do this. But I really like some of my favorite stuff. I like The Last of Us, and I like I really liked playing Left 4 Dead too, especially because from Savannah, and it goes through Savannah, Georgia, and I think they did a wonderful, wonderful job art directing the Savannah level because it captures the light in Savannah. There's a character of the light that you get in the summertime in Savannah. Like there's a different character to the light that you get in the summertime in Western sort of Europe, where I am on the um, latitudinally. And in Florence, when I lived in Florence, I noticed that there's a certain character to the light in the summertime, and they really captured that in Left 4 Dead too. So again, I'm just catching shadow. I'm just coming through here and just catching bits of shadow. Something that Eduardo Lenteri talks about in his book Modeling and Sculpting the Human Figure, which I think is really important and might seem like a foregone conclusion, just like, oh, of course, it may sound obvious, but a lot of times people think if they want a wrinkle, they're going to carve it in really deep. But that's a mistake because sometimes what you're trying to do is you're trying to um, change the value of the shadow. You're trying to darken that shadow, and you don't always have to dig something in to darken the shadow. Sometimes the solution is actually to build up what's next to it. So I'll come over here and I will build this edge up, and that darkens that shadow. Because if you carve in so far, at some point you hit bone. It's unnatural. Oops. Sometimes my right click on my pen stops working and I can't navigate over the model. Let me focus and save. And I've got some notifications here. Okay, just checking to see if that was Pixologic. Nope. Okay. Let's see what's happening in questions. How do you earn with a model like this? Because I want to do the same, make weird model, but earn too. Um, the COVID stuff got in the psyche of the ZBrush community. It's expected. Sorry, let me backtrack. Flowers, yes. Gotta go, yay. Nice tutorial live show. Thank you. Thank you. Arnell, how do you earn? I mean, you can put up stuff on like online shops, I guess, and or put up a tutorial online at like Flip Normals or something. The important thing to know is what subdivision is used for, yeah. COVID stuff got in the psyche of the ZBrush community. I mean, it's hard to avoid it. It's everywhere. Um, Side effects, nice to see you. Thank you for coming. What's the function of the dynamics button in the brush menu size menu? Um, Yeah, 3D printing and selling is a good way to make money as well. The dynamic slider. So what that does is it changes the brush size, or it keeps the brush size consistent. If I double click that and turns it on, so if I set my draw size to that and then zoom out, my brush size stays dynamic. It stays to the same size as the model. If I turn it off, then it's no longer locked to the size of the model, and that's to assist in curve brushes, things where your draw size is going to impact the shapes that you're actually going to generate with curve brushes and things like that. So that's what that's all about. So just checking my time, we're 4. So we're just an hour in, and I'm just going to come through here and sort of play around with this stuff. I'm going to go to the clay tubes brush and turn my focal shift up, and I'm going to step down a subdivision level. I'm just going to knock that back and do a bit of smoothing here. Think about, I mean, I'm not too terribly worried about everything below this line here because I already know that I'm not going to be framing the image with that. And a lot of times, if I'm doing something that's a concept, and I'm going to work to what I'm going to be showing because I'll have to finish something like like this stuff on my portfolio site. I'll finish something like that in like a day or 2 days, and that includes the sculpting phase. So um, you just don't necessarily always have time to do the entire thing. Like I often won't poly paint a concept. I'll just do all the painting in Photoshop, and then so I've started actually though poly painting on stuff sometimes as I'm sculpting, because I worked with somebody who did that, and it was cool. I liked the way it looked, and I was like, oh, I'll give that a go. So sometimes that's kind of neat, and it might be beneficial for you, but I don't do it terribly often because it can be a little distracting. I like seeing things in gray because I'm accustomed to seeing, clay, and I like things that are just a neutral gray color when I'm just trying to see form. So again, just catching shadow here, catching little areas of shadow, and then I'll catch highlight. Take the standard brush with alpha 1, like really simple, basic ZBrush alphas, but it's all down to keeping an eye on things like your edge contrast and your values, just like you're drawing. You're just like when you're drawing, you're creating form by creating the illusion of light and shadow. When you're sculpting, you're manipulating light and shadow by adjusting form. So it's two paths to the exact same thing, and you have the exact same concerns. So, you know, like I was getting some wonderful things out of a book on charcoal portrait drawing last week that absolutely apply to sculpture. Um, it's just a matter of recognizing the information that you need and realizing that all the mediums, ZBrush, drawing, painting, clay sculpting, they all support one another and they're all relevant to one another. So it's something that applies to one thing, other than maybe like technical elements of a particular medium are going to apply to everything. All right, so let's come back here now. And let's give a little bit of thought to the neck. I'm going to go to my clay tubes brush and I'm going to use alpha 1. And I really like the clay brushes because clay brushes tend to add into the recesses first. So if I drag across this, it's going to give me more sort of reaction in the recessed areas of the model. I'm going to take the standard brush and sort of build this up, step down a subdivision level and do a little smoothing here. I just want to kind of create sort of this, the platissima that's actually going in the wrong direction. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm just going to bring some cordage up the neck. Another thing too is like don't be afraid to lose things. Like not every muscle, not every form needs to be completely surrounded by a shadow. So you can lose shapes. In painting, it's called like lost and found edges, and in sculpting, I just call it losing shapes. Like don't feel like you have to describe every muscle with a shadow going around it. Like not everything needs to be completely defined because that's not the way it would look in reality anyway. Because like the sternocleidomastoid muscle is a really good example. Like this muscle here, um, I'm going to try and knock back some of that silhouette by going in with the clay tubes brush over here. When you see this muscle, you're seeing the one that's not actually firing, because when this muscle fires, it's turning your head. So if he was looking over his shoulder over here, you'd see this one sticking out because the skin is stretching over it. When it fires, it shrinks or it gets shorter and fatter, um, and um, is no longer as apparent. So these muscles are constantly changing shape. So I'm going to knock that back a little bit. Also, another thing that I do a lot too is I use trim dynamic. I try and tell my students too that like the smooth brush is destructive. Like the smooth brush is destructive. You shouldn't always rely on the smooth brush when you're trying to sort of establish a shape. I will often use the trim dynamic brush and I'll establish planes and I'll knock back planes and then smooth with a small smooth brush on the transitions between those planes. And it's sort of similar to if you had some marker or you're in Photoshop and you've laid down two values and then you use a blending brush in between those two values to get that sort of tertiary value in between them to get that nice blend. Same idea. Um, the more you break down the shapes into aggregate planes, the more refined it kind of becomes. I'm going to turn off X symmetry here at the center of the neck. I'm going to step down the subdivision levels. The more you break stuff down into their aggregate planes, like the more refined it becomes, the more refined it looks. Turn on my X symmetry again just to fix the neck here. And I want to bring those clavicles out a little bit. There we go. That little lump there is really bugging me. And the angle of the jaw here is bugging me, the angle of the mandible. So I'm going to mask this out. I'm getting that delay on my brush again, so let me check my activity monitor. Make sure that nothing's popped up to devour memory. And while I'm over here, I'll look at the questions. Oh, thank you, Just Call Melsony. Thank you. Thanks, Anna. Have you seen Ask the on YouTube? Cool, cool. All right, so I want to isolate the angle of the mandible here, and I want to fix that because that's just not cool. Clear my mask, just smoothing on that. Take the move brush. Let's isolate this, and then I'm going to tuck this in, and I'm going to isolate this, pull this down, and I'm going to turn off my X symmetry because these little dips at the corners of the mouth are quite obviously symmetrical, so I kind of want to get rid of that. Go back with my damn standard brush and make sure it's on Z sub, turn up my Z intensity, and I just want to come through here and sort of play around with the shapes at the corner of the mouth. Let's clear that mask out. There's a masseter muscle that goes in this direction, but on something this desiccated, it would be really not very defined. So let's just sort of, I like to sort of loosely sketch the direction that I think the skin would fold and try and be very gestural and not like really down in one area. I like to just make quick loose strokes across the surface. Again, that's kind of just like if you're drawing in a sketchbook, it's better if you're sort of drawing from your arm rather than your wrist. They always say that, you know, in school they'd always say draw from the arm. In animation, like we would do that just to get the nice reverse curves and big arcs. So, and in product drawing, we would do that with the marker, so you get a big sweeping line. So like I say that right now as I'm doing little marks, but like it's quite hard for me to make big ones because of this brush delay. But I will go in here and I will make these sort of big sweeping shapes like this, drawing with the arm. And so like that's a good example. Like you get stuff like that out of like Scott Robertson's drawing instruction on the Gnomon Workshop, which is fantastic. And it's going to help you if you're drawing, and it's going to help your ZBrush as well. If you just don't think just because he's drawing with charcoal and marker that means it's not something that is a valuable tenet that you need to like listen to and maybe think about how you can apply that to ZBrush. You know, if those big kind of sweeping curves, those big sweeping strokes that flow through your shape, they don't have to be the final thing. You can knock back a bit of it with some selective smoothing and then reintroduce some. But that's going to help. It's going to help build things up. It's going to help make things fit together nicely. And I have my X symmetry turned off right now. I'm just going to grab some shadow here and grab some shadow here. I'm going to give my hand a rest for a second. Let's check questions. Feel free to ask questions because I can scroll back and answer them. Why done yourself so handsome today? Is that to me? I guess that's to me. I don't know. I don't know what you mean. No, I have Twitter. I should probably go the other way so I'm not reading things in reverse. Hello, Polyguy Studio. Yes, I am on Instagram. It's MaddieMonster_art. But if you just go to maddiemonster.com, you can find a link to my Instagram there as well. Hi, Neo. Hello, Mr. Anderson. iced coffee. There we go. All right. So let's see. Looking at my notebook here. Rib halo. Let's get away from the body for a bit and let's make a halo because I really want this thing to have a halo. Now it's a demon and demons can have halos too. I thought you might. Sorry. You get that all the time. Sorry. That was like stupid easy. We'll go to spare parts. And under spare parts, I have these. Thanks, Hackmaster. I teach at Gnomon, the Gnomon School of Visual Effects. So if you go to Gnomon School on online, you can enroll in my classes there. I teach an introduction to ZBrush class, and I teach a ZBrush creature design class. And I have a 20-hour video training series at the gnomonworkshop.com, which is a subscription service where you get everybody's video tutorials, not just mine. And I also travel around the world and teach when you're able to fly, but right now we're not able to fly anywhere. Thanks, Bantha Voodoo. I like to talk through things, and like I said, I've been teaching ZBrush for 14 years now, so I usually don't get derailed. I can usually talk about things as I'm doing them. For surface detail texture, what type of surface or references would be a good place to start for someone who's still new to it? Um, hmm. Everything. Um, like looking at reference, looking at all sorts of surfaces and references. Just constantly look at stuff. Kind of has a pinhead feel to it. Did you use the move tool or snake hook for those pieces? Maybe even an insert mesh. If you go back and look at the previous ZBrush live session, it's a mesh. It's a vector displacement brush, and I made another one for today. So thank you, Emmanuel. Neo, the online class is Gnomon Online for the live class, the 10-week course, and then the video tutorials are the gnomonworkshop.com. Okay, so I've got these ribs here, and I've got one where I've polygrouped them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this. And I'm going to move this down to the very, very bottom of the stack. Potentially outside of this folder. There we go. And I'm going to put this into a new folder and call it ribs. And you see I've got these things polygrouped. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide this polygroup here by Control-Shift clicking on it. And that one. I'm going to invert visibility by Control-Shift clicking and dragging on the background. Got a delay on my brush again. And that's got those two polygroups together. I want to group those together, so I'll come down here to polygroups and group visible. So now I should be able to split these into their aggregate parts by going to Subtool Split, Group Split, click OK, and then now if we increase our visible count, you'll see inside that folder I have split out all those different ribs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hole fill these. So I'll just go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Close Holes. And I'll do that for each one of these. So one easy way to do that is go to N, and I can select from here. If I don't want to scroll back up, the N hotkey will show me the meshes that are actually there. But so you can actually see it in the interface, I'll scroll back and forth and do it this way. And I'm just closing the holes so they don't have big open ends on them. Close holes. Cool. So I was thinking it would be neat to sort of make a halo out of ribs. That's kind of disturbing. So I'll go to a rib that's got a nice big arc to it. Let's turn off solo. Oh, that's not going to work out. Let's just do it this way. These are going down. Wait, nope, that's the one I think I want there. Yeah, we'll use that one. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll take this one and is there a way to move some groups without the transpose master? Yeah, if you watch earlier on, I do a folder group where you can move an entire folder using a transpose group. Sorry about blowing your ears out, Bantha Voodoo. Let me move my microphone. Gnomon Workshop is monthly membership, but you get hundreds of really amazing training videos for that. Cool. All right, so I'm going to take transpose, hold down the Alt key, move this, and I'm just going to look at my sketch really quick. All right, so what I'm thinking is I will get rid of this bit here. So I'll go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden, Close Holes. All right, and I'm going to make a halo here. So let's do an append, or we'll do an insert. And that just inserts a subtool right underneath the current one. Oh, it should have, but it put it there. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to go to the gizmo, and I'm going to select Ring 3D. Zoom out a little bit, and let's change our sizing on that, just so we've got a little guide piece. That's what I want here. And I'm going to rotate to a front view, make sure I'm looking right down the front at it. All right, so I'm going to turn off solo, and I'm going to shift-click the eyeball to show all, and then I'm going to shift-click it again to hide everything. I'm going to select the rib here, and I'm going to turn on visibility on that ring. Let's switch over to the ring, turn on visibility on the rib. So I'm going to scale this ring down, move it up, and I'm just going to use this as a little guide for making my rib halo. Just so I've got a circle on screen. I mean, that's it, just to make life a little bit easier. If you lose your gizmo, just alt-click on your model, and it'll snap the gizmo to wherever you are. So I think I want the ribs to be smaller compared to the size of the halo itself. So let's scale that up. And then we'll take this and bring it over here, move it over here. I'm going to unlock this and reset it, lock it again. So now I can sort of rotate it this way, snap to a top view and rotate it this way. And that's kind of cool. So I'm going to now duplicate this. And while we're at it, let's move these out of the rib folder so we can duplicate these more easily. I'm going to rename this, or excuse me, I'm going to create a new folder here and call it Halo. And let's drop this in here. So now I'm going to duplicate this subtool. And I'm going to go to my deformation menu. And I'm just going to mirror it across the x-axis. Make sure visibility is still turned on the other one. And I'm just going to hold down the Alt key and then move, hold down the Alt key, not the Control key, move my pivot. And let's just move this over here. Maybe we'll scale this down a little bit so there's some variation to it. We're going to get rid of the ring. The ring is just there as a little, like, guide, just to make things a little bit easier. So, thought it would be nice to do that. And I can duplicate this and keep it in the same subtool. If I hold down the Control key and click and drag, it'll mask the other version. This is in the same subtool. I have not created a new subtool. I've just duplicated that particular piece of geometry. And that really only works if you have just one subdivision level. So I thought it might be cool to have these things sort of varying in size and shape. Let me turn off transparency. And I'm going to turn the ring off for a moment. That's kind of cool. Let's go back up to our other ribs here, and maybe, what's another good one? That's a nice one. We'll duplicate that one, and we'll drag that down into our halo folder, and transpose. I'm going to alt-click on it so I can snap my gizmo to its location. Let's rotate that. Rotate that. And I'm going to actually rotate it 180 degrees. Oops. This way. Holding down the shift key to snap rotate it. There we go. Let's do something like this. And let's bring this up to here. And I'm going to mask up to here. Move my gizmo. And if I hold down the control key, I can break that rib there. I don't know that I want to do that. I think I'm actually just going to delete that part. So I'm just going to hide that. And I'm going to go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. Close holes. Let's go back to our subtools. And let's transpose this up here. All right, and I'm going to take this tool and I'm going to go to Merge, Merge Down. Always okay. And this one's sitting outside the Halo folder, so let's move it in there and merge down. There we go. Okay, cool. So I am going to now duplicate this and mirror it across the x-axis. Hopefully that works. And then I'm just going to make some, oops, takes the move brush and make some changes to it so it's not perfectly symmetrical. If I control shift click, I can isolate polygroup and then control click on the background to invert the mask. And if I click this button here, it puts the gizmo at the center of the unmasked area, and I can now go in here and oops, make sure that everything is unmasked. I've got a little extra mask right there, so I can scooch this around and make changes so it's not perfectly symmetrical. Although it might be neat to have some symmetry, but I don't think with like a bone halo that really is justified. My polygroups are a little scrambled, so I'm going to fix that by going to polygroups, auto group. The reason being is the end caps where I filled holes, that ended up having an extra polygroup. Yeah, I'll carry on doing them. Yeah, I don't like the Move Topological brush because it's a little slow. Just a tiny little bit that bothers me. That's it. I use it on toes and I use it on teeth, but I don't actually. I don't use it for big like design shapes, like the early parts of the sculpture. Yeah, I will definitely carry on the parts since, you know, we're at 4:30. We've been going, what, an hour and a half? We started at 3? Yeah, 4:30. I need some more iced coffee. I love talking to you guys. It's really fun. I mean, like I love teaching. Obviously, I've been doing it for so long. I love teaching and I love like interacting with people and sharing information. So I'm happy to do these, especially since there is the time to do them. And this is a fun thing. I mean, it's cool to do something that I haven't like worked up ahead of time and like let you see what kind of goes into it. At least for me, putting something together. Sorry, I hope that cough wasn't too loud. There we go. Um, so let's duplicate this subtool. I want to sort of like speed the process along, but I don't want things to be like totally symmetrical. Um, like symmetry can be cool. Like bilateral symmetry can be cool when used judiciously. Like you see it a lot in like a lot of like sacred art across different religions. You see often you'll run into sort of bilateral symmetry because it inspires feelings of, when done well, it can inspire feelings of awe or feelings of like divine perfection or whatnot. So, you think about anything from mandalas to like some a Giotto, like early Renaissance painting wouldn't necessarily be totally bilaterally symmetrical, but it draws a lot on the like there is a lot of symmetry going on in there. You'll get it a lot in like altarpieces, uh, Gothic architect or Gothic like altars, things like that. You'll get it. So my point is like symmetry is not bad, but it has to be done really well um, to work and not just look wrong. So I'm going to duplicate this subtool again, and I'm going to flip it across the x-axis. Um, Mirror. All right, and then I'll just take the move brush. Now, one thing that I could do is I could go to my brush controls and go to auto masking and turn mask by polygroup up to 100. And I can get rid of our little guide ring here. Not that we really needed it. But now that I've got the mask by polygroups on, the first polygroup I click on is what's going to be moved by my brush. So if I turn my move brush up to 100%, click on a polygroup, I can move a whole shape. And I will Control Shift click on this, mask it, invert the mask, go to transpose rotate. I'm just going to use my transpose line. I don't mind the transpose line. Some people get really wigged out by the transpose line, but I used it for so long, I'm just accustomed to it. But teaching it, I understand that it's very confusing for people when they first encounter it. Just always remember that pretty much you're going to need to redraw your transpose line each time you seek to use it. So I go to transpose and I just need to draw a new line now. And then, carry on. It's not that hard. I'm going to rotate this around the axis, longitudinal axis. So I'll draw a line like that, go to rotate, and then just click and drag the center circle, and it rotates it around the axis of the line itself. Someone's asking if I have a target polygon size when sculpting. No, I use this as whatever subdivision level I need to make the shape I'm trying to make. And then that factors into if I'm sculpting detail, I'll need to obviously increase my subdivision levels, but if I'm doing like form, I'll keep it pretty low. I don't think it's valuable to worry about subdivision levels. It's like, don't worry about, it's like when someone's done a painting, the joke is always like, what brush did you use? Well, it doesn't matter what brush you use per se, it's how you use it. And with ZBrush, subdivision levels don't really matter because that can change depending on how dense the model is as it's at its first subdivision level. A 4 polygon model is going to be a different mesh at subdivision level 3 than a 4,000 polygon model. The important thing to keep in mind is just make sure you're making a shape, I believe, at the lowest subdivision level that will support making the shape you want to make. And I'm talking about basic forms. Like, look at things like Philippe Ferreau, the sculptor in Montreal, who does he's not the only one who does these. It's very common practice. Do planar analysis busts. Think about what the most basic form of the shape is that you're trying to make, and sculpt that as your first step. Don't try and leap in and sculpt all the different bells and whistles and details. Like, I wonder if I can't, I've got a book up here. Let me see if I will luck into pulling up the page that I want. Let me see. This is Bridgman. Oh, here we go. Let me go over to OBS so I can see my camera and see if you're seeing what I'm saying. So seriously, if you don't have George Bridgman, get George Bridgman. All right. Everybody wants to draw like all the details. They want to sculpt all the details first. That's what's important. The planes and the forms, the basic shapes. Like, that's the important stuff. If you get that, then everything else falls into place. And like, very rarely are people sort of guided to that at the beginning. They want to go in immediately and be doing, the really refined sculptures. And no one said, nope, wait. make the basic shapes first, and always think about that. Like there's never, I don't believe there's ever a time in your sculpting career where you stop thinking about the basic shapes. It's like that's where everything else is hung off of that, and you can't impress it enough. You can't say that enough. You can't think about it enough. I mean, I'm not really obsessing over it when I'm working, but when I'm sculpting stuff, I am trying to think like, what's the most basic form of this? And then I'll start to break it down and make it more complicated. Like I was saying with the planer brush, or not planer brush, pardon me, the trim dynamic brush, where I'll trim planes into things and then further refine those planes to make something more complex. So this is creating a rhythm that I don't like. I don't want that repetition there. So I'm going to undo that. So I think I'm going to just scooch this. I'm glad that I got to show you how to do that, but how to rotate it around that axis, but I don't think I want to keep it that way. I'm going to move it over here, and I'm going to draw another transpose line and rotate it. It's kind of creepy ribs, sort of crown of thorns things going on here. It's kind of neat. Let's clear our mask. And just want to get rid of that, move that up a little bit. Might even be cool to get some phalanges and some finger bones in here, but let's fix this. I'm going to Control Shift click to isolate this, mask it, Control click on the background to invert the mask, go to transpose rotate, and then let's just rotate that a little bit. I just want to get rid of that perfect mirror that we've got with the other side. Okay, let's move this into position and kind of see what it looks like with everything else. Oh, I should save my work. Press the 9 key. And while I'm doing that, I'll just Alt-Tab over and look at the questions. The thumbnail is the best Nancy Pelosi I've ever seen. What thumbnail? Oh, the thumbnail view. Oh, I get it. I get it. Adam, sounds like your license isn't working, so you want to contact Pixologic support for that. Want to know about using a subdivision or dynamic or Dynamesh. Dynamesh is great for establishing volumes. I use it to establish volumes, but I don't sculpt in it. I get out of it as soon as I can, in most cases. But if I might spend a long time in it because I'm still working out shapes. Like I spent all of the first session of COVID-DEMON in Dynamesh because I was just working out what it was going to be. But then once I've got the volumes, I get out of it and I turned it into a subdivision model that has subdivision levels, which talk about in my Gnomon workshop video, and I think I talked about it in the last session here, and then can carry on sculpting using subdivision levels. Normally like getting the additional options in the customized menu and using Gizmo 3D. Yeah, Gizmo 3D is awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Because of the Gizmo 3D options, they're two separate tools. Transpose is better for posing than Gizmo 3D would be. New messages. Thanks. Hey, Vimal! Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Uh, Getting all the additional options. Weather is hot. Yeah, it's gonna start getting really hot here in London. It's getting into that time of year. Prod 4210. Yeah, it was going to be a one. Well, it was never going to be a one shot. It was just getting the time to do it again. So cool. Let's see. All right, let's make everybody visible again. This can be a little bit of a pain. I need to shift click to make everybody visible, and then I'm going to turn off the things that I'm not going to be using right now. So we are going to use the lungs, so I'll collapse that folder. I am using the skeleton, so I'll collapse that folder. Got an extra pelvis there, it looks like. Nope, the pelvis was just pulled out of the folder, so I'll put that back in that folder and collapse it. Alt head doesn't need to be visible, and spare parts doesn't need to be visible. Ribs doesn't need to be visible anymore, but our halo here, we're going to use a transpose group. So I'm going to click on this and make a transpose set. So this answers that question that came up earlier. How do I move things without Subtool Master? So I'm going to unlock the gizmo, reset the gizmo so it's going right up the axis. And let's, oh, it doesn't have everybody in the set. Looks like I've got this one here not in there, so I'm going to alt click on that one. So see where that one is. That's not in Halo. That's sitting outside the Halo folder, so let's put that in the Halo folder. Did I just move that in the ribs folder? Yes, I did. So let's grab this, drag it down into the Halo folder. Drag this in the Halo folder, drag this in the Halo folder. Now we'll make a transpose set. There we go. That should be everybody. So let's unlock this, go to the unmasked mesh center, turn off X symmetry so it actually goes into the center. Oh, that's not going to work with the group, so that's fine. Unlock it, reset it, lock it, move it up. Ah, dang it, I'm still not catching this one. Alt click on that one. Where are you? There's a mask on there, so let's clear that mask. Looks like it was just because there was a mask on that. That was the problem. The sternum there, I'm going to drag that into the ribs. There we go. Okay, so turn solo off. And I'm going to Control Shift click and drag on the background to clear my transpose group. And now once again, I'll go back and select my folder here. Transpose set, hopefully that works this time. Unlock it, reset it, lock it. There we go. Alright, so let's move our gizmo down here. Let's move it back. Scale it down. Let me look at my little thumbnail here. Turn on perspective. So I think it's going to be something like this. Oops. Wrong axis. So it'll be something like that, maybe. And let's get the ring and move the ring into spare parts. I want to hang on to that ring, but I don't want to be using it right now. Hey, that's interesting. A little bit of a Art Nouveau in hell kind of feel. Big Art Nouveau fan. That's one of my favorite, if you call it, yeah, it'd be a school of art, arts and crafts movement. Art Nouveau is definitely something I love and collect. So that's, yeah, that's got some neat potential to it. So maybe I'm going to bring this forward and let it intersect with the head a little bit. So I'm going to go back to transpose set and just move that forward a little bit. Something like that. Because we're going to be looking at the character from sort of an up angle like that. So let's save our work. Press 9 and save as 16. And we're at 4:45, so 3, 4. Started at 3, 4, 5. So we'll have, no, that's 2 hours. 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 2. I'm doing math. I went into digital art because I don't do math. Cool. It's really quick. I am just going to go to my files and show you something that might be interesting. Just so you got an idea. Hey, that scene kit extension is back. Let's kill that. Quit. Force quit. Cool. Now I'm going to go back to my Finder, open a new Finder window, and I'm going to go into my files, COVIDEMON, demo tool, demo 2, and I'm just going to open up Keyshot. If you don't have Keyshot, oh my god, you should get it because it's great. Keyshot's awesome. It's just very, very easy renderer if you don't want to spend an awful lot of time with LookDev. You want something where you can just get a nice looking render and then maybe paint over that in Photoshop very quickly. So, like the composition, obviously he's not posed yet, but I mean this is kind of where I'm heading is something like looking up at the character with this harsh light coming from overhead, and his arms will be posed, and there's other elements that will be brought into play. But this sort of, and we've already moved past this point when I blocked this scene file in. I just wanted to get the materials in there. Something else that I do that comes from Gino Acevedo, who's actually sort of kind of the person that taught me how to paint with an airbrush. I mentioned him in my last class. Was the best, in my opinion, the best painter in the makeup effects world, one of the best painters in the makeup effects world. And then he moved over to digital. He's art director at Weta Digital, works in the art department. He was my boss when I was in textures at Weta Digital. But Gino has a really good Gnomon video as well, which is another reason to get a workshop membership. And he does this thing where he renders two passes, one that's extremely translucent and one that's less translucent, so you can mask out between them in Photoshop and reveal areas of translucency. I want this creature to be quite translucent, which is sort of interesting. If something's too translucent, it can start to read as very, very small. So when we get to the rendering in Photoshop, we'll see how that all works out. But I quite like having it look real pasty and weird, and we'll do some poly paint on it as well. So we're definitely going to be doing another session, so we'll carry on. But let's close out a Keyshot because this is absolutely annihilating my my resources. So quit out a Keyshot. Don't need to save my changes. I just wanted to give you an idea of what the composition is generally going to be, so you've got an idea of where we're heading. Don't save. I told you. There you go. Okay. All right. And I just want to check the questions again. Testimate. Thanks, May. Testimate is a way of tessellating the mesh sort of globally. Testimate it works really well in conjunction with Sculptors Pro mode. So it triangulates the mesh to a set degree that you tell it to on like a global level. Okay, so we've got about almost another hour, so let's make use of that. All right. So, in my spare parts, I have a piece that I believe is this one. Let's see if that's the one. No, is that the one? That's the one. Turn on that one. Yeah. So let's drag that out of spare parts. I think I just dragged that into alt head. I did. So let's put head variant in there, and let's take mesh 1. We'll just scroll down and we'll close these folders, and let's drag this down to the very bottom. There we go. So this is another one of these little spiky shapes, and I thought it might be interesting to see how this looks if we made a few of these along here. So let's turn off our pizza boxes, and something's going on with our, where's this extra rib cage? I'm going to alt click on that, and that spare parts is turned on. That's why I can see that. So we'll turn that off, and we'll go back to this guy here, and I'm going to scale that down, and I want to make sure it's sort of lining up to the rib cage. So this is exploratory. I mean, this may work nicely. It may not work nicely. And this is something I could do with array mesh. I want to do a repeating kind of thing, but I'm just going to do it manually. So what I will do is unlock the gizmo, reset it, lock it again, and I'm going to control, click and drag. Oh, I've got subdivision levels on it. I was like, why is that not working? Delete my lower level. Control, click and drag, that duplicates it. Then if I let go of control, it will carry on duplicating it down like that. But I want there to be variation in, oh, that's neat. I want there to be variation in the scale as it goes down, though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to control, click and drag. That will duplicate. And I'm going to hold down the Alt key and adjust my gizmo so it's running down the axis, and I want to just scale it down a little bit, like this. Now I am going to unlock the gizmo, reset it, control, click and drag. I'm going to pull that out just a little bit, and I'm going to Alt click rotate the gizmo so again it's pointing down the axis, and scale it down a little bit. Now again, this could be done with array mesh, but I just want to do it manually because array mesh is an awful lot to dive into in the middle of a demonstration that's not geared towards just being array mesh. So let's bring this one back. And maybe we'll scale this in X a little bit, bring it in, and maybe we'll rotate this one a little bit like this. So let's see, is that, maybe like that. Maybe I want to give them all a little rotation like that. So that's pretty cool. So I want to be able to manipulate these individually, and they've got a whole bunch of polygroups going, so I just want them to be polygrouped individually. So I will go to my polygroup menu under Tool and Auto Group, so every piece gets its own polygroup. Then I can manipulate them individually. So we'll work our way up from the bottom. So I'm just going to mask this, invert the mask, go to a transpose rotate. Now I'm going to have to manually bring my rotation back up here. Alt click and drag so it's pointing down the axis of that. And maybe we'll rotate that out and give it a little rotation like that. So they're going to kind of fan a little bit. Let's go to this one. We'll isolate it, invert the mask, go to transpose. What is the function of macros, someone's asking. So I talked about that earlier, actually. If you go back and watch the stream, I talk about that. These buttons here are macros. It's a way of Z-scripting without having to Z-script. So I'm going to, scaling them all by accident, but that might be cool. That might be cool because that might make them not subservient, not subordinate. That'll make them a bit more of a subordinate shape to the other things that I've got going on in the chest. So I think I actually am going to run with that happy accident there and see how that works out for me. But I want to Control-Shift-Click on that, mask everything else, invert the mask, go to Transpose Rotate, and again I have to manually place my gizmo. This is all like very fast too. Like I'm talking about it and explaining it as I do it, but were I not doing that, I would be doing this very, very quickly. Where I'm going to unlock this and I'm going to rotate that gizmo. Where it's very intuitive, it's very much, the speed of thought. You're able to kind of break the stuff down as you're thinking of it and try different things. Oh, I just lost my rhythm there. So I think I was talking and I lost my, yeah. What I want to do is solar this, make sure I get my pivot point exactly where I want it. And turn off frame mode. And I think I want to rotate this like that. And I think I want to bring this back in Z space. Like that. Oh, like that. Maybe. Maybe? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. Go to rotate. And let's rotate this down. Interesting. Let's save that, hitting the 9 key. And then we'll do a mirror and take a look at it. It might work, might not. And we might take it all the way through to keyshot and then get rid of it. I'll do that too. Like sometimes I'll like something and I'll hang on to it, maybe sometimes longer than I should, and then get rid of it because it's like, okay, no, this isn't working. This is detracting from something else. Like it might fight with this shape here. I made it smaller because that I believe will make that subordinate to this shape, and I can potentially adjust these lines. So right now, do you see how these lines just in an abstract terms, these lines are like, well, I don't know where I'm going, and these lines are like, whoa, we're coming out this way, like shoop, shoop, shoop. Like these lines are like, I'm not really keen on the points there, but I'll fix that in Photoshop. But these are like, yeah, 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 and these are like, meow. So at some point we'll come over here to the rib cage and we'll see if we can't match that shape language in the rib cage here. So the rib cage is no longer this sort of like organic cage into which your organs are being protected. It's suddenly very angular. It's feeding into those jagged lines coming out from the sides, should we decide to keep those. And it's just all saying aggression and infection and danger. Just looking at the questions now. If I was doing something like this for work, I would need to finish it in like a couple days, 2 days, 3 days. Sometimes you get a luxury of more time. Depends, but like usually, you've got a design dailies. Like I think on, yeah, I don't want to be specific because I worry about my NDAs. But like if you're designing on a show and there's regular dailies, you'll probably have 2 days in between dailies. Like a day, you have dailies, and then you have a day without dailies maybe, and then you have dailies the next day. So like it's really good to have something every couple days or every day. And you can sketch stuff too, like things you can present things like in my creature class. I talk about taking ZBrush sketches and making them presentable in a way that doesn't look like it's just a half-assed 3D model. Like you could take something that's sketchy, and if you're thinking about big shapes, communicating big shapes, and working everything at the same time instead of getting bogged down in little details on stuff, you can take that into Photoshop and put some, smudge out some areas, put a light, noise on top of it, keep it grayscale, and you can have a bunch of things to show as thumbnails. Like you can do thumbnails in ZBrush. It's amazing how you feel the shapes and just don't tell how it looks. Thanks. Yeah, I like feeling things. They're just always like spiky, monstrous things. Cool. All right, so I'm going to manually save. So maybe we will come over here to the ribs. And ribs are 26,000 faces. It'll be really cool. I can actually actually, before I do that, I'm going to go back to these guys here. And, uh-oh, got a real delay going. Let me check my system monitor. I think that dreaded SQL thumbnail extension is back. And it is QL thumbnail extension. Yeah. I'll do an hour of free ZBrush tutoring to the first person who can email me how to kill that process so it never comes back, and if it's safe to do that. Because it's just driving me up the wall. I just have to keep force quitting it. Scene kit QL thumbnail extension. Force quit. It's not letting me quit it this time. It's taking up 24 gigs of memory. There we go. Now it's gone. 24 gigs of memory. That's a memory leak if I've ever heard of one. Okay, so let's rename this. We'll come down here. I don't rename things in ZBrush as much as I should. I'm crazy about layer organization in Photoshop and naming stuff because I will often have to go back to a Photoshop file more often than I necessarily go back to a ZBrush one after 6 months. But what happens is shows will go away. So a lot of times, like a lot of stuff you do in concept, you're doing what are called pitch books. So somebody will come in, they want to make a movie, and they don't have funding for it yet. and they're trying to pitch it, so you end up doing key art and character designs and bits of pieces. They put it together with a synopsis, like an elevator pitch, and make a little book. And then probably like 80% of everything I've done has been that, and you can never show it because you have to. The movie has to get made, and a lot of that stuff doesn't get made for a long, long time. Some of it does get made, and that's awesome. But like uh, a lot of times these things just sort of end up out there in the ether. Why was I talking about that? I don't remember. Oh, right, because with that in mind, like a show will go away for a long time, and then it can come back 6 months later, and somebody be like, "Hey, Maddie, that warrior thing you did for such and such show, they're back. That's a thing again. They want it, but can you make it purple and give it tentacles in its head?" And you're like, "Oh crap, okay." So when you go back to your Photoshop file, which you should still have, or your Z tool, it's nice if everything's labeled and you know what it is because you'll forget. I forget like a week later. If I go away on vacation, I forget my Mari hotkeys. So like, um, it's good to have that. And if you take my creature class, I show you my process in Photoshop, and I'll give you a taste of it when we'll eventually get to maybe Photoshopping. It is a ZBrush stream, so I don't know that we'll spend too much time in Photoshop, but at some point I will finish this in Photoshop, and I do show my process of keeping all my layers, but reducing the amount of layers I actively have to deal with. Um, so I want to mirror this across these little chest spikes. So I'm just going to go to, well, this time we'll use Subtool Master. I've been doing it manually up to this point. I'm going to save, only because sometimes I get a crash when I use Subtool Master to mirror, and sometimes I don't. It's not consistent, but it happens enough that I want to be careful. So I'm going to go to Subtool Master, and then go to Mirror, and then across the x-axis, merge into one subtool, click OK, and then there we go. So cool. Now this may work, may not. I might have to change these shapes. I might have to adjust them. Oh, my mask by polygroups is still turned on. So let's take mask by polygroups and turn that down to 0. So I might have to adjust this. This is actually going to really depend on, once it's posed, what we get from that. But I want to go to these ribs now, and let's turn on chest shapes and make sure we don't have any subdivisions. Oops, I'm on the lungs, not the ribs. Those lungs are nasty. Those are some gross looking lungs. Make sure we got our X symmetry on, and let's do what I was talking about. Let's think about these wicked shapes here. So I'm going to undo that move that I just did. So I am quite happy with this right here. So I'm going to mask this with a lasso. And that's going to protect these lines. And then I'm going to use the move brush to tweak this. And anything that's interpenetrating or being weird, we can always dynamesh into a clean shape, or we can retopologize it. So I just want to sort of play around with these. Why am I using a mouse? I should be using my pen. I'm thinking about getting a Cintiq. I used the first generation Cintiq. I had a Cintiq when they first came out. And I mean, it was the first gen, so it wasn't perfect, but it was awesome. I thought it was pretty cool. And then when I went to Weta Workshop, I didn't get to take my Cintiq with me because it belonged to the place I was working before. So then I got on an Intuos 4, and I'd been using an Intuos 2 before that. And the Intuos 4 was so nice. I just kept using that, and then I stopped really using the Cintiq. Um, and I'm thinking about getting one again, and that's purely because I've been spending so much time on Procreate, laying in bed with Procreate. I'm like, man, working on the screen, because I'm just really accustomed to this disconnect between my hand and the screen. It's just, it's second nature to me. It doesn't bother me. It actually took me a little bit of time to grow accustomed to working on the screen when I started using the Wacom. But I've been, or I started using the Cintiq, but I've been loving working on my iPad so much that I'm thinking I might go ahead and get another Cintiq, because I know that like they've gotten so much better now. At the time, there was like a delay on the Cintiq. There was a delay on the stroke that was really, really difficult to kind of get around, but I know that that's been fixed. Oops. So I'm just thinking about these angles here. It's also fun to get something like a big thing like that for yourself, like your birthday. My birthday's coming up, so maybe I'll treat myself to a Cintiq for my birthday. Or if anyone from Wacom is watching, you guys did use my work in your ad campaign back in 2016. You could sponsor me with a Wacom tablet, and I could talk about how awesome the Cintiq is. I'm going to go to B for brush, P for pinch, I hotkey, and I just want to pinch down these points here. And I'm going to go back to my move brush, and I'm going to turn on accurate curve mode. I should make that a hotkey. I'm big on hotkeys. I'm so big on hotkeys. I teach them from class 1 in my intro to ZBrush class, because BMV is one thing to get to the move brush, but I use it, so it's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got my 5 favorite brushes hotkeyed. I've got everything that I do all the time hotkeyed, or I know what the default hotkeys are. I usually try and know the default hotkeys because I teach, so I need to be able to go to somebody's machine that hasn't customized it and know exactly what to expect. And when I would if I'm on a show and I'm in a position where I'm going and talking to other people, when I was at Gentle Giant Studios, we all used the same hotkeys, just because it made it easier to go and work with somebody else and talk to them about their stuff. And I don't think we talked about doing that. We just ended up doing it. I'm sort of like zoned out there and was sort of doing that telephone doodle thing. And I don't know if those shapes work, but this needs to come down. And I've got my delay going again. I just want these to feed into these. And bring this down. I was thinking about starting a Patreon. I thought it'd be fun to do a Patreon and do like videos on there and like documents. I make documents for my classes, like little Word docs that have like I call them Maddie Monster docs, and they've got like recommended books or tools and techniques and stuff. Thought that might be a fun thing to do. I started following a Patreon artist who's really cool that I like his tutorials. I love tutorials. I watch tons of tutorials. I love learning. I love classes, and I think it's always good to be in classes, to be in a classroom situation. I think it's really valuable. Like I'm not in classes right now, but I was taking French for a while in a classroom scenario, and I like doing tutorials, but guided learning is great because somebody can mentor you, somebody can tell you what you're doing wrong, and that is a big help. So that's kind of interesting. I'm going to clear my mask, and I'm going to subdivide this once. I'm going to turn off frame mode, and I'm going to go to geometry. Oh, my tablet's acting up again. Go to geometry, clay polish, and I'm going to turn up R sharp and clay polish that. I should have saved. There we go. So that puts that faceting in there. You see how that just made that, the camera's not there, it's there. You see how that just made that all faceted and kind of bladey? So that's kind of cool. Those shapes feel a bit better to me now. I'm going to take move, pull this down. Oh, that puts a mask on there, so I need to make sure that I clear that mask. I'm going to pull that down to there, and then we're going to leave this alone for a bit. We're going to move away from it, but I wanted that stuff to feel like it was part of the same language. Like now it's all Klingon. Before it was a little bit Portuguese, a little bit Spanish. They weren't quite the same. Now it's all Klingon language. Actually, literally, it looks like something a Klingon would wear to me right now. It's got that Klingon-shaped language. So, interesting. So we'll see how this works once he's posed, because we're going to do this thing that I call push-pull on the pose, where it's like you can have a pose that's like Frankenstein. And I love Jack Pierce. I love Boris Karloff. I love Frankenstein, but it can be kind of a lumbering sort of forward thing. And I want to do something that's a spiral composition. It's from portrait painting, where you rotate at the waist, rotate at the shoulders, rotate at the head. and then the push-pull is where you've got one arm out, one arm back, and the tension is instead of that or that or it's push pull. So to me, when I'm posing something and I've got that kind of, I just call it push pull. It creates an interesting tension. I shot a really embarrassing reference photo of it that I'm not going to show you yet, but if you come to the next one, I'll show it to you because we'll be posing it probably because we're not going to. Don't think we'll get to um, posing. So going to the questions. Scroll it up. Hi, Robert Bowen. I'm glad you enjoyed the last one. Do you still have to go in and look for this type of work? I mean, you have to find a job or you have to find clients, yeah. I mean, you always have to find work, whether you're working for a studio, you had to find that studio to work for if you're working for clients. I find looking for work so stressful. Do you ever sketch polypaint lines on the meshes to arrive at the detail you require? Like polypaint lines? No. I sketch polypaint when I'm painting. I'll get a little gestural. I'll try to be gestural as much as I can. Yeah, Pro 4210. Yeah, there was a show, I can't say which one, but there was a movie. I was at a studio. I was at a major studio right when I left Los Angeles, if you know my timeline. And they designed a big movie, huge movie, and it was canceled the day of principal photography, and everything had to be put in storage, and it's never been seen. The movie has been made since then, I think, by somebody else, but none of that work will ever be seen. And it's just like, oof. But that's another thing. You can't be married to the stuff you make too, because like that was a, a rude awakening for me. Was realizing that you cannot survive if you consider yourself only as good as your last daily session. Like if you completely screw something up, then you suck. But like no, like if your stuff doesn't get picked one day, it'll get picked the next day, or something can get picked, and you can have you can have a design that's going in the film, and then that can change like that. Like right before they'll be like, no, wait, no, let's go back to that other thing. So it's like you can be super invested in that sort of thing, and I don't think like psychologically you can survive very long that way. There needs to be a disconnect to a certain degree. You still value your work and value what you do and take great care in it, but you can't attach like we artists will attach a lot of our personal value onto our work, and there's a balance there that was hard for me to achieve at first because I was I have an obsessive personality. That's why I recorded a 20-hour introduction to ZBrush. So that's kind of a valuable thing that I learned. Um, Hello, Argentina Esteban. Hello. Bantam Voodoo. Yeah, Geo Napkill, I think for the longest time he sculpted with a mouse. I don't know if, I mean, now he's sculpting in VR and doing amazing stuff in VR, but I remember for a long time he used a mouse. So 13-inch Cintiq. That sounds like a good size for Cintiq. Hi, Art of Mike Disney. Saeed says, I remember you were fatter before. Okay. Yes, I was. Thank you, Saeed. He said, nice work today. Thank you for that. Not the you were fatter before. um, Learning the program, and I love it using IMM method to build my figures before sculpting. Yeah, building things up from insert multi-mesh is really great. Anna, I don't know. That's a good question, but if I worried about what people commented on with me, I would always be worrying. I just think, whatever. Uh, I think it's fine. Do commission work as a mini painter and illustrator, and it's the way you have to be. Have to have a disconnect. Yeah, yeah. You should post I don't know if you could post links in there, but you should post a link to your portfolio. Post a link to your stuff. All right, so cool. It's 5:16. We've got time to keep going. Just let me double check and make sure that Pixologic isn't messaging me going, get off the stream. Okay, cool. We're all good. Heard back. Kyle, the wizard behind all this that you enjoy in ZBrush Live, just let me know that the sound is good now. So that's good to know. Need some more iced coffee. Almost out of iced coffee. Let's refill it. Any more questions whilst I refill my iced coffee? Cool. Mike has posted his portfolio in there. You should check that out. Mm. Of course, yeah. Everyone's welcome. Cool, cool. All right. I'm just gonna look at my little notebook here. We did the rib mantle, rib halo, the hip blades, bone alphas. Yes. Um, does Pixologic pay for these streams, or is it just for fun? No, I'm not getting paid for it. I'm just like doing it. I just like interacting with all you guys. Any tips on fitting objects in Boolean holes? Life Lover, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you watching. Cool. Bone alphas. So yeah, that's something that's kind of neat since we're working on this rib cage. I'll just solo this piece, and actually, let's go to the halo. Let's do it on the halo because I'm tired of looking at that particular area. Again, big believer in moving around a lot, and I move around a lot more than I'm moving around in this demo because I'm demoing. If I was working on my own and not recording, and I'm accustomed to recording demos, so I changed the way I work for demos that are being recorded. I'm moving around the whole thing at the same time because everything needs to come up together at the same time. The idea being, like, it comes from, like, when you're drawing, you draw, everything comes up together at the same time. Everything's at the same level of finish at the same time. So at any one point, you could stop and potentially it's a presentable piece just at whatever stage it's in. But if you've got, like, you've spent a bunch of time obsessing over one area and then the rest of it's not really there, it can get lopsided. Or, like, what happens to me if I do that is the head becomes too big or too small, or the body goes off. It's just everything at the same time is how I'm usually working, and I'm usually working around the object. Very, very attention deficit disorder. Very much, to the next thing, to the next thing, the next thing. But it's cyclical and it makes sense, and it's actually a good way to approach things. So we're going to divide these ribs a couple times. All right, we're at 1,000,000. I'm going to press 9 just to do a quick save. So I love doing custom alphas, and I've got these custom alphas here that I made in my alpha menu. Bone alphas. So I made these for sculpting bones and doing bone textures. So let's see, what's a good one? There's bone pores 3, bone pores 4, and then bone striations. Let's do bone pores 2. Well, let's just grab all of them. I'll load that one. I'll load bone pores 3, and I'll load bone pores 1. Just double clicking them in bone pores 4. Okay, and then we'll turn off the light box. And eventually I'm going to put this alpha pack up on Flip Normals. Those guys are awesome. I love those guys. I worked with them at DNEG, and they're just the coolest. So if you end up seeing this, you guys, hey, hello, miss you. So it's Henning and Morton. So I'm putting together an alpha pack, so these will eventually be out there in case you're wondering. So I'm going to go to my alphas, and I'm going to grab, I think, Bone Pores 1. And I probably won't bother putting a radial fade on it. What I'll do is I'll keep it on the dot stroke and see about just spraying it on. So if I hold down the Alt key, there we go. I get a nice porous bone texture. And I basically just sculpted this by hand. I didn't grab it from a photo or anything. I just made my own alpha. And I think it's really nice to just sculpt your own alphas, because, like, taking things from photographs is one thing, but you can get sort of JPEG compression issues, and I don't know. I like sculpting my own alphas because I can get exactly the texture that I want. So I can also change this to a drag rectangle stroke. Sorry, I'm just looking at the questions. Saw a lot of activity over there. Cool. Hold down the Alt key and then drag rectangle. It's another nice way to put down the texture because you can make it bigger. I don't really need to put this degree of texture down on these bones given how far away they're going to be from my final composition. It might read in the specular element, but maybe not any more or less than putting noise in the specular roughness channel or bump channel. But I did want to show this. And also, chances are really good that I would do like a close-up, like of the head or the face or something. If I was presenting something like this, I'd probably try and crop into the face and get some detail there. So just be aware that like the level of detail that I'm putting down here, once we go back to the view that we're typically working from, you're not really necessarily going to see it. So I'm getting this bleed through on the alpha. That can be resolved by going to backface mask here. And then when I click and drag, it won't bleed through. And I'll go back to my freehand stroke or dot stroke, and then we can grab, that was bone pores 1. We'll go to bone pores 2. Again, I'm just holding down the Alt key and just gives me another texture. Turn down my Z intensity. And it's just great because bone has that really specific type of porous quality to it. Dried bone, living bone is really waxy, or like fresh bone. Like if you see bone in a body, it's got a real waxy coating on it. It's there's blood in it, like it's a living tissue. And the bones that we're accustomed to seeing in like medical skeletons or reference skeletons, that's dried out, desiccated. It's not what bone actually looks like. I was really shocked when I took a knee apart and saw the patella as it actually is, because I'd seen patellas on medical skeletons, like actual skeletons, but I hadn't seen one coming out of a cadaver, and the waxy quality to it was very, very interesting. There we go. So I just wanted to give you a taste of that, but you see as you zoom out, we lose that, it goes away, so it's not really terribly useful for this particular purpose, but I'm going to frame this with Shift with F, rotate this back around, and let's revisit the body now. Let's go to, I'm not sculpting the forearms because I'm going to be posing this character, and the forearms are going to be supinated in the pose. So one hand, the right arm, got to position myself. So this hand will be here, like this. This hand will be forward, and posturing with that. If you watch the first one, I talk about posturing and how like twisting up the fingers can give you a really gnarled and kind of also communicate subconsciously sort of neurological issues or intensity of emotion. There's a lot of stuff tied up in that. That I'm losing his name. Not Ghastly Graham Ingalls. Bernie Reichsten was great at making those like postured, real creepy hands. And John Hale, Phil Hale, there's a painter. He came to my school and I loved his work, and I've lost his name now. He's really good. He often has this posturing in his hands that's really nice. So my point is, those arms are going to be pronated. Both of them are going to be pronated. Pronation and supination is your forearm movement. So I should move over to OBS so I can actually see if you can see what I'm doing. So this is my arm. There we go. That's my arm. So that is supination. And just think of it as a bowl of soup. I got this from Andrew Koss, the guy that runs anatomytools.com. Great place to get little anatomy figures. Supination, you're holding a bowl of soup. Pronation is that. So your forearms can supinate and pronate. I believe your tibia and fibula have a little bit of supination and pronation to them, but the point of it is, as soon as you do that, the entire structure of the forearm changes. Like you've got your origin and your insertions of your extensors and your flexors, and they're twisting around. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to bother with the forearm yet until I put it into pose, and then I'll sculpt it. A lot of people in my classes will start sculpting a bunch of form on their character and then pose their character and feel like they're done. No, as soon as you start posing the character, the anatomy is changing. The shapes are changing because some muscles are pulling towards their origin and other muscles are getting stretched towards their insertion, the ones that are not firing. So that's going to change the compression of the flesh. It's going to change everything. So sometimes it's better to just sketch something in, put it in pose, and then go in and figure and refine it. And that's exactly what we've done here. You know, we've sketched in where we got an idea of where the extensors and the flexors are going to be. Might do a little bit of tweaking on the silhouette, but we can go in here and work on the hands. How are we doing on time? Yeah, we got a little bit of time, so we're just gonna. I'll do a little quick pass on the hands here, and it looks like I've got that really bad delay. So let me check my activity monitor and make sure that I don't have something eating up my memory again. Nope. Oh, I know one thing that I can do though. I can come back over here, frame this, go back to my halo. Alt click on my halo, and let's step down those subdivisions. I don't want to carry that around. Okay. Alt click on the body, solo that. There we go. Yeah, it's a shame about the DNEG internships, Ravlin. You look like a dollar store female. Well, thank you, Felix. I, more of a, I guess, pound shop. I don't live in America, so, you know, we don't use dollars here, but that's okay. Is this a design for a game, mini, or just 2D art piece? It's just designed for me. It's for an illustration at some point. Any tips on socketing bones, gliding parts, or fitting booleans? Um, yeah, but it's probably beyond the scope of what I can do right now. Um, Thank you for coming, Saeed. I appreciate that. Thanks, Mike. Cool. All right, so clay tubes. All right, so I'm going to take the move brush and do a little bit of shifting shapes here. So the hand's a little bit flat. Something that I probably would like to do at this point is isolate the two hands so the body's not getting in my way as I rotate around. So make sure that my X symmetry is turned on, and I'll just isolate the two hands like that. Hi, Sean. Hello, Ireland. Oops, sorry, just 1 second. I have to buzz a delivery person in. Sorry about that. I ordered a new sketchbook and I wanted to make sure that I got it today. Cool. Hello, Ireland. Dublin, Ireland. Sean, nice to see you. You bet, White Box. Great stream. Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Ahmed Tata. Thank you. I'm glad you liked the Noman video. Inflate thumbs too thin. Yep. Getting to that. The thumbs are. So it's all a bit flat. So this was, if you saw the first stream, this was just blocked in and some initial posing put into this. So I'm going to tweak this shape here. I'm going to take my clay tubes brush and probably no alpha. And think about the metacarpals, which are the long bones of the hand, which creates this nice little ramp down here. Go check out my blog at maddiemonster.com. I talked about it earlier today. There's a section in there, Maddie Monster's Library, where I talk about my favorite anatomy books. And the first post in there talks about Peck's Atlas of Anatomy, and he's just got really, really nice analogies. And he's got one about the ramp of the tendons. Oops, I still have the brush accurate curve turned on. The ramp of tendons coming down the back of the hand. and it's just it's quite nice. And this little piece here that he calls the anatomical snuff box, which is a very antiquated term for it. Let's make sure that we turn that alpha off. The anatomical snuff box, but it's these two little tendons here. And then inside of there, you're going to find the bony landmark of the epicondyle of the radius. And then, because you don't see that, it's very, very deep. And then you've got the epicondyle of the ulna here, which is a very important landmark. Very good landmark to keep an eye on because it's going to be in a straight line with the olecranon process, which is the elbow. And then it'll form a dividing line between the flexors and extensors of the forearm. So it's really good to have a clear idea of that. So that just went too thick. Let's undo that. Take the move brush. Starting to get that little delay on my brush. There we go. The link was maddiemonster.com. Someone's asking, I can't read the name. Someone's asking about the skeleton and bone stuff. I'll probably put it up on my art station. That'll be the easiest way to find it. Thanks, Balkan 3D. I'm really glad that you're enjoying it. Where was I? So, should get my reference up here. Earlier today, I just shot some photos of my hand and the posture that I want. So, I'm not doing this without reference. I always say that we don't use reference as much as we should, and a lot of people don't use reference as much as they say they do. Like I don't think you can ever use enough. I had a incredible professor in school who's like one of the biggest influences on me. His name is Paul Hudson. He teaches in Canada now. And he's one of the greatest artists that I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. And he used to tell us in class, don't lie. Don't tell lies. You can, and he was talking about making things up. He was an illustrator and concept artist. He was concept artist for NASA. And he said, when we had an assignment where we had to have blood splatter in our illustration. He said, go outside, get some Karo syrup and food coloring, and make blood splatter, and draw that, photograph it, and draw it, because what you make up will never be the same, or never be as kind of compelling or interesting as what randomness of nature is going to produce. And it's like a really good point, and it really kind of stuck with me. Not always, I do often find myself in a situation where I'm not following that advice, but anytime I do follow that advice to this day, it's always better. I'm not going to get too caught up into the hands right now because we're running out of time, but we will revisit. We'll carry on. I think it's fun to do these things in multiple iterations and see it happen in real time, because a lot of times these things are presented where they're already put together, or you're stepped through a few different aspects of the process, and I'm not afraid for you to sort of like see my whole process, see my whole thought. How things sometimes work, things don't work. I think it's nice to know that things don't always work. Sometimes you do have to go back and revisit stuff. My tablet. Yeah, Wacom, if you're watching, you should totally sponsor me. And so, like, fingers here. This is where transpose line really shines. Draw a transpose line. End it at a knuckle. Hold down the Alt key, click and drag, and you can bend with what they call bone posing, which is a built-in skinning algorithm. So I'm going to go back to my clay tubes brush, and I don't want to get too caught up in one area. I want to, again, be thinking about these metacarpals. The carpals are the little P-shaped bones in the wrist. And I want to take my move brush. Oops, move brush. I want to adjust that angle there. I might need to have a little bit more of the arm visible as I'm working. Get that ramp. So that's my tablet acting up, is when it shoots away from me in space like that. Get that ramp there. Standard brush, alpha 1. And I just want to get the little webbing kind of indentation between each finger. Let's push that in, push that in, push that in. Now the fingers from the back bend here, and from the front they create two creases here and here. So I'm going to take my damn standard brush, and uh-oh, I've lost my pen tip. Sometimes that happens on my computer. There we go. I'm going to save. I've got that creeping feeling I need to save. Maddie Monster, it's MADDIE-MONSTER. I'll type it in. www.maddiemonster.com. And you can get all of my social media there. That goes to my ArtStation. MaddieMonster.com is my ArtStation portfolio. Oh, Anna, I'm glad that you got the Goldfinger book based on the recommendation. Yeah, he's great. I'm going to do another one on his animal anatomy book, comparing and contrasting it to Atlas of Anatomy or Atlas of Animal Anatomy from Ellenberger, Dietrich, and Baum, which is a really good animal anatomy book. How come your work area canvas is the smaller one and not the full size? Just because I zoomed out. Why is it like that? Nah, I don't know. It's just what I don't really care what the canvas size is if I'm not painting in it. So this works for me. It's different. I think it's different on my machine at work too. I think it's larger at work, but it's not it's not something I ever really thought about. Working on a turtle in ZBrush right now. Oh, cool. I'm glad it's helping. Hi, Music with Sunny. Cool. Oh, wow, there's 194 people watching. I suddenly feel watched. Hello. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. We're doing on time. All right, we're gonna be wrapping up here pretty soon. So, we will let's step back. Take a look really quick, and I will carry on from the exact same point. So we won't do anything else when you're not watching. But I want to take a look at where we are. Let's turn on our 19, our creepy little 19. There we go. It's got quite a regal quality. We don't even have it in pose yet. What I want to do. The lungs. I made these and I want to show you these. This is cool. So let's save manually. We've got enough time to do our vector displacement brush that I made for the creepy tentacles coming out of its chest, which may be a step too far. I might not use these because a lot's happening in the chest right now. Thanks, Ivan. Thank you, Vladimir. I really appreciate that. I'm glad that you find yourself in love with sculpting. Thanks, Dosh. Yeah, web batching. I know where to go change the default document size. I think probably the main thing is I like being able to click outside the document window. I just don't change it. And like I said, it's bigger at work. It's also, I think it defaults to what your actual screen size is. Cool. All right. So I made these before I put these little things in there. So these are probably a step too far in terms of piling too much stuff in the chest, but I want to show you on the lungs anyway because they're pretty neat. We're going to solo the lungs. And I'm going to open, if I go to load tool, I'm just going to move this over here. And I'm going to open up tentacle vector displacement 02. So in the first stream, I talked about making your own vector displacement brush. So here is a vector displacement brush that I made this morning before the stream because I thought it would be fun to use. And it's just Rob Bottin-esque sort of Deep Rising. If you saw Deep Rising, I love Rob Bottin's designs for that movie. He's a huge influential artist for me. Sort of thought these might be interesting coming out of the lungs. And I've got a example of them being used. This is a vector displacement brush. If you want to see how I made this, watch the first part of this stream. Gotta find the file. I'm gonna move it over here where I can see it more clearly. Tentacle brush example sphere. You know, I've never seen Stargate. What tablet do I use? I use the Intuos 4. There it is, just coming out of a sphere, which is kind of neat. Like you could turn this upside down and it's some kind of little like long-leggedy beastie or something. It's just, I love vector displacement brushes. They're so much fun to kit bash with. And I love it when they blend together in a nice way. Like that blend isn't working particularly well, but that one's working quite nicely. Yeah, that's kind of cool right there. So this is just coming out of a sphere that's just 1.5 million polygons, so they're super efficient. So I'm going to get rid of these subtools, by the way, because I don't want to carry them around in my scene. So to do that, I'm going to go to my subtool menu, delete all, click OK, and then that subtool is deleted out of my scene. I'm going to go to my vector displacement brush that I sculpted here, which I definitely don't want to carry around because I had to divide this up to 16 million polygons to get all of that out of a plane. And so I want to delete this. So I go to delete all. Excuse me. Delete all, and okay, that's gone. Now, go to our lungs, focus in on that. So I thought it'd be kind of neat, potentially, but I don't think I'm actually going to end up using this, to use this brush. So I'm going to go to the brush menu, and I'm going to load brush, and from my brush menu, I'm going to do Toothy Tentacle VDM. Was that it? That was today. Oh, there's two. Insert tentacle. No, that's ZBrush preset. ZBrush preset. I forget which one it is. I think it's this one because it's 1.9 gigabyte. That's a big old brush. So this is basically the chisel brush with a drag rectangle stroke and that vector displaced shape stored in it. So we could draw these out so they're coming out of the chest cavity. Originally, I wanted that sort of forward thrust of an element to be these sort of tendrils coming out of the chest, but then I put those little spiky bits on there. I was like, that might negate the need for one or the other. So I'll turn off solo, and maybe we could also balance it out by getting rid of the sockets. So turn the sockets off, and then where the sockets were, and I will turn off X symmetry because we definitely don't want these to be symmetrical. We can click and drag, and we end up with these things coming out of the lungs. Now, the lungs are only 200,000 faces, so we should just undo that. And divide. So we've got more geometry that we can work with here. So just hit a Control D to divide. Oh, I'm going to have to get off soon because there's another streamer coming on. So now we are at 700,000 faces. We'll divide again. Excuse me. Now we are at 3 million. There we go. So now we click and drag. And we can get these nasty little tentacly beasties coming out of the chest. all ready to give you. The delay is giving me a problem. Yeah, that's not cool. There's a delay, so that scene kit is running again. So let's double click that and kill that once more. Force quit. Okay, now it should speed things up. Yes, perfect. So I'm going to use the mouse for this because sometimes I can get a little bit more control when I'm adding something to a really, really dense mesh if I use the mouse. So there we get one of our guys there, and we'll put one here. Put one down here. And of course you can rotate them so they're not all kind of pointing the same direction. So that's kind of neat. So it's cool, but if I were framing it like this, I might keep it. But because of the way I plan on framing this character, I think they create too many tangents here. It's just not clear. You have no idea what you're looking at. So it has to be framed like that, or they have to be curling out and around, maybe coming back behind the arms or something, in which case I'd have to do something with a mesh insert curve brush. But on its own, if we were to solo these lungs, it's kind of a neat thing. So yeah, this morning I was just thinking, hey, it'd be pretty cool to have something like that. So I sculpted it today just for this. So, and right now at 3 million polygons, we're getting a pretty good result with them. There we go. And it interfaces with the lungs really nicely. I like the shapes that they make where they're growing out. So let's undo that last one so it's not going the exact same angle. And then we'll draw it again like that. There we go. So we should stop because there's another streamer coming on and I don't want to step on their time. But thank you so much for being here. Um, I really, really appreciate your interest. And if you want to be in touch, you can find me at maddiemonster.com. That goes to my LinkedIn, my Facebook, my Instagram. My ArtStation is that actual site. Anything that I release in terms of documents or tutorials or alpha packs will go up on there. Um, and yeah, hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, and we'll do another one of these and carry on. And I think we'll probably have one more of these sessions in this character. We need to sculpt up the hands, do the pose, do some detailing, and then um, get it into Keyshot and set up our Keyshot renders. And then I probably wouldn't do a Photoshop paint over in a ZBrush stream, so I might do something on something else, just where I do the final compositing and painting of it, and make that available to you guys when we get to that point. So. Um, this is Maddie Monster, Madeleine Scott Spencer. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll keep you posted on when the next one is, because we've all got plenty of time to be doing stuff. So we'll run another one and carry on. So thank you again, and if you have any, let me do one more check of the questions. Cool, thank you. Thanks, Anna. Thanks for being here. Thank you, guys. Thanks so much. Cool, cool. Um, can you turn that VDM into a repeating curve brush? No, because it's sculpted from a plane. It's its own thing. I was looking at making a repeating curve brush for that tentacle this morning, and then decided to make it a vector brush instead, so I could just make it more detailed. Um, thanks everybody. Thanks so much. So just want to make sure that I haven't missed any other questions. Cool. Wonderful. Thanks, guys. I'm going to end the stream now, and as soon as I've got a time frame for the next one, I'll announce it. Won't be too long. Probably be about the same amount of time between this one and the last one, if not less, because I'm really excited to finish this, and I don't want to work on it too much when you guys aren't around. So thank you. Take care, and I will see you. I'll see you online. So bye.